It's the early 1990s. A young, energetic boy is sit crisscross applesauce in the small living room of his home, having just popped a tape into the VHS player, ready to watch a movie on a small, fuzzy, 12-inch television. Now, I will tell you more about this story over the next couple of parts. However, as you can probably guess by now, that little boy was me. And this is a memory seared into my brain still. One of my earliest movie memories, alongside my first theatrical experience, that being 1990's Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and the very first time that I saw Ghostbusters on cable. But we are here to talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark, which is a film that holds a special place in the hearts and minds of so many people from the film world. And if you're wondering why I put together this 3-part collaboration project for this 1981 action-adventure film, we've got to rewind the clock back to May 2024. During the first season of this show, I covered the 1981 year in film along with Joey R. from Best Picture Cast. And during the course of us revising Oscars and turning the voting power over to you, Raiders of the Lost Ark finished that episode cycle claiming revised prizes in the Supporting Actress category for Karen Allen, the Director category for Steven Spielberg, and in Best Picture, taking down the actual winner Chariots of Fire. So when last season ended, I had 12 revised Best Pictures, and I let you all vote on 2 films that you wanted me to do collaboration projects for in 2025. And in a wonderful bit of symmetry, those 2 films you selected were Raiders of the Lost Ark and Saving Private Ryan. Now we'll get to that other Steven Spielberg film at the end of the year, because we're here to discuss one of the great popcorn movies during the summer, the time of the year where blockbusters reign supreme. So buckle up, because over the next 3 months, you'll hear from more than 20 collaborators who all wanted to share their memories of this film, as well as answering some other questions I posed to the group, such as what their Steven Spielberg Mount Rushmore looks like, who they'd pick as an Indiana Jones contemporary recast, and I had them rank the franchise's 5 films. So without further ado, let me turn this over to the first featured contributor. That's Newman from Movies for Dayz, and I'll be back at the very end of this thing to wrap it up and answer a few of those questions myself. Enjoy the adventure.
Ahoy, one and all. Newman here from Movies for Dayz, your non-pretentious, easy-access movie chat podcast. So grateful to Andrew and the Revisionist Almanac for inviting me on to have a quick discussion about my thoughts about Raiders of the Lost Ark. If you dig what I say here today and you'd like to hear more of the things I say, come and check out my podcast. You can find it on all podcast platforms. You'll find all episodes easily searchable at yourunpodcast.com, and you can find me on Twitter at MoviesDayz, Dayz is spelled with a Z, or Instagram, Movies for Dayz. Dayz is still spelled with a Z, there's a number 4 right in the middle, and we've got underscores surrounding the 4 to keep it safe. All right, let's get into it. Raiders of the Lost Ark. Dear God. What are my memories watching this film? Well, my dad introduced this to me. I was born in the late 80s, and so my pop introduced this to me on home video. We had a huge video collection in my house growing up. Both of my parents were sort of lapsed hippies turned film fans, and they brought us up watching good shit. I don't know what else to tell you. And so the Indiana Jones trilogy was a regular fixture in the house. I don't remember the first time I watched these movies because I watched them over and over and over again. And the things that made me laugh still make me laugh. The things that made me gasp or cheer or clap or throw my arms up in excitement, there's just no half-life on that rewatch value. It's always awesome. So I guess that answers the next question. Does the film hold up 40 plus years later? Hell yes! Better than many modern adventure films. Uncharted. What was the point of that? Do you have a favorite sequence or scene? I don't even know how to begin to pick only one. I love the entire opening sequence, of course, with Alfred Molina and throw me the whip and the big boulder. I love the drinking contest where we meet Marion and that awesome opening, like long one shot that Spielberg loves to do. And the entire fight that ends up with torching the whole goddamn bar. I love the whole fucking truck sequence, of course. I love that part where they open the pit and there's a bunch of fucking snakes and Salah's like, asps, very dangerous. You go first. John Rhys-Davies, so wonderful. Never gets old. And I have to say, I think out of the entire trilogy, Belloq might be my favorite villain because he has charm and he has swagger and he has the same intelligence and knowledge that Indy has. So he's a really worthy adversary. And the actor does such a great job. You enjoy watching him do his thing. It's like when you get a good actor to play Lex Luthor. You should enjoy watching him do his thing. Any thoughts on the actual Best Picture winner from that year, Chariots of Fire? I've never seen it. I've barely heard of it. I don't know anything about it. Old British dudes running on a beach, maybe? Oh, yeah. Da, 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 da. Yeah, that shit. Yeah. Never seen it. Don't know anything about it. Don't care. How do you rank each film in the Indiana Jones franchise? Well, for me, it's interesting. I think that you'd have to say that Raiders is the best movie, even though Last Crusade is my favorite movie. I hope that makes sense. But if we're just talking about what's the best, Raiders is the best, Last Crusade second best, Temple of Doom, while still amazing, is the least awesome. And to the best of my knowledge, there aren't any other Indiana Jones movies after these three. So we've run out. That's it. Can you imagine if they made some horribly unthought out sequel that was just terrible and left the entire franchise with this just awful taste in your mouth? Or if like they did it again a whole bunch of years later after Disney bought it and it was just a soulless piece of garbage? Jesus! I'm sure glad that never happened. Is Harrison Ford more famous for Indiana Jones or Han Solo? I think Han Solo, you have to say. I mean, you can't really beat the global appeal of Star Wars and just how prolific and pervasive and just undying that franchise seems to be. But I prefer Indiana Jones. I think he's a cooler character. And I mean, comparing the two franchises in reality, they both have 3 movies that I think are awesome, and the rest of it I just kind of pretend doesn't exist. So there that is. If they were to recast Indiana Jones with a contemporary actor, who would you pick and why? This is a tough one. Harrison Ford is just the guy. You almost can't think of anybody else in that role. But bang my head against the wall on this for a few moments, and I came up with Dominic Cooper. I think he's got a good look. He's got a good tude. He looks good fighting on film. He can do larger-than-life characters with earnest. He's convincing in romantic scene work, and he can do a believable American accent. And if you need proof for all the shit I just said, check out the 4 seasons of the TV show Preacher, where he is the lead. It's based on a comic, and it's awesome. Is Raiders of the Lost Ark on your Steven Spielberg Mount Rushmore? Yes, it absolutely is. My Spielberg Mount Rushmore is Jaws, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Hook, and Jurassic Park. Yes, Hook is on my Mount Rushmore of Spielberg. And if you want to talk with me about that, hit me up. I'm a very agreeable dude, and I love meeting new people. What up, film fans? How important is John Williams' musical score to the story and the character? Y'all, John Williams is as important to this fucking character and this franchise as Lucas, Spielberg, and Ford. And if we're really talking about it here, Robert Watts as well. Kind of the unsung hero of this team. Indispensable part of making these movies what they were. And he died just last September. So let's pour one out for Robert Watts, because he deserves mention here as well, in my opinion. Also, if you want a treat, find some interviews with him on YouTube about the making of Indiana Jones. And he is just so funny because he's very sardonic and he's very British and he just puts a lot of attitude into everything he says. You got to check him out. Does it bother you that the film's plot would have played out exactly as it did with or without Indy's involvement in the story? Okay, here's the thing. First of all, no, it doesn't bother me one bit. Here's the thing about this. This is something I've heard bandied around on the internet for a number of years, and I don't think I agree with this premise on its face. Like, really, maybe I'm just soups confused. Hit me up if you can explain this to me. As the movie happens, the Nazis are digging in the wrong place. It's only Indy who finds the Ark. He has to dig it up with Sallah and his team, who actually knew where to dig. And then Belloc and, blonde asshole and, Nazi brigade swoop in and say, aha, we got you. We're going to take that out of your hands. And off they go so that, the angry, vengeful light force of God can take them out. So even though that's not what Indy was trying, it's not what he was planning, this statement about everything would have played out exactly as it did, whether he was involved or not, I don't think that holds any water, because no, it wouldn't. They wouldn't have found the fucking Ark without Indy. And so the end point of all the Nazis getting killed by the angry, vengeful, godlight only happens because Indy found it at like the halfway mark. So seriously, if I've got this backwards, or if I'm mixed up about this, or if this whole theory about Indy not actually having anything to do with the plot, if there's some detail in that theory that I'm not understanding, someone hit me up and let me know, because, I say this with respect and love. I think you're all full of shit. And finally, is the enduring power of Indiana Jones baked into the fact that he is often failing and in turn making him more vulnerable? Yes, 100%. For me, I like a hero that gets knocked on his ass. I like a hero that tries to put on somebody else's uniform to be a disguise and it doesn't fit, and so he has to figure something else out. I like it when the plan doesn't go the way it's supposed to and you have to think on your feet. It's a huge part of what makes him endearing and a more American character, in my opinion, than like a James Bond, who's always suave, even when the odds are against him. So yeah, it's another reason for me why it's so hard to imagine anybody except Harrison Ford playing Indiana Jones, because unless you look at like the young Indiana Jones adventures with our boy Sean Patrick Flannery, nobody else ever did. So yeah, there's all of that. I love Indy. If you want to hear more about me and two of my awesome podcast friends talking all about the Indiana Jones trilogy, you can check out my sub-series, Trilogy Trifecta, episode number 6, Indiana Jones. And I just want to say thank you once again to Andrew and the Revisionist Almanac, all the other contributors, and everyone listening right now. And hey, as Indy would say, may the Force be with you.
Hey guys, my name is Matthew Anderson, and I'm the main host of the Lone Screenplay Nominee podcast, where myself and a guest discuss films that were solely nominated for an Oscar in the writing categories. This past year, our show decided to also discuss in-depth the lone writing winners for our mini-series, which includes films like Almost Famous and Pulp Fiction. We also did films such as Conclave as well, our most recent lone screenplay winner, whatever you want to call it. As far as where you can track me down, head over to my Linktree account under the name @Matthew995, where you can follow along on all my social media accounts such as Twitter, Instagram, and even where you can listen to more episodes of my podcast. We're also on YouTube as well, so you can follow along on our YouTube channel as well. This discussion, though, on Raiders of the Lost Ark, when Andrew asked me about what my memories were for the film, I recalled not seeing it until, I believe, after I had seen The Last Crusade, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. It might have been around, I would say, like, definitely maybe 2008, 2007. Might even been a little bit later than that. I can't recall, because it's all been a bit of a blur from then and now. But what I do have in terms of memories of the film is that I remember seeing it twice. The first time was I'd watched it during my high school years at Holy Redeemer. And we had a local college nearby that was hosting a screening of all these old classic movies back, from the 80s and 70s and such. And one of the films that they had hosted was Raiders of the Lost Ark. It was at the RC Theater in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania, which is where I'm centered around, essentially. And they hosted a fair amount of family-friendly films, like I said. And so I caught a screening of this and had a blast watching it on the biggest screen possible. Thought that was really cool. And on a random day, this is the other memory I have of it. On a random day, bike riding with my dad and my brother, we found out that the Mahoney Drive-In, which was about an hour or so away from where I lived, was doing a double feature for the first two Indiana Jones films on 35mm prints. So we literally dropped everything and drove out to the place to watch it. And that was a fun experience in of itself. Just seeing the first two on the original celluloid prints that they were structured on. And yeah, it was really fun in of itself. As far as the film itself, I mean, do I really have to go into much detail in regards to, what I think of it? It still holds up from the action set pieces, the wonderful score by John Williams, Steven Spielberg's masterful directing. If there's anything I do want to bring up specifically about the technical work that I want to point out as to why it all comes together so well, it is the editing by Michael Kahn, who really deserves the Academy Award for creating such tension-building scenes, whether it be the opening where Indy must dodge all the booby traps that he goes through when he gets inside the cave with Alfred Molina, or the intense truck sequence with the Nazi soldiers ramming into his vehicle. And while the fight scenes themselves have a good pace to it, it's the exposition sequences that have a good momentum to them, as the editor, Michael, I should point out once again, knows exactly when to cut from a wide shot of Indy discussing with Marcus about the Ark to cutting to an insert shot of him taking the revolver out of his little handkerchief or whatever, slip he has with him, that's covering the gun. So it's things like that. And there's other moments throughout the film too that I think are well executed. And there's even though there's a lot of cutting in the film, they know exactly how to cut from shot to shot. It isn't just, let's just cut for the sake of cutting. It very much feels within line of delivering what Spielberg wants to tell as a director, because he's also known for doing a lot of one-take, one-ers, whatever you call them, and he's pretty good at that. If I had to pick a favorite scene out of the many incredible sequences in the film, I guess I'd have to go with the sword fight, as I still love watching that scene with Indy just pulling out the gun on him and just shooting the guy. And it always cracks me up, especially when in Temple of Doom, he's forced to fight the two, swordsmen with one of their swords rather than use his own gun. So yeah, I still think that's a pretty funny sequence. As far as 1981 as a whole for movies, though, look, I can't comment too much on that year because I didn't get a chance to see more than what was nominated for picture and director. In fact, when Andrew brought up a chance for me to come on and talk about Indiana Jones as a whole, I said to him, look, I'll make a priority to at least see the rest of the Best Picture lineup that was out that year, and it just so happens that they're all also nominated for director. So I thought, all right, I'll get around to that whole lineup, so to speak. And what I keep forgetting, though, is that back when we were in a year of 5 for picture and director, this was the second to last time where we had the same exact picture and director lineup, and they're both 5 for 5, same film, and their director's also nominated too, but they had a split in terms of picture went one way, director went the other way. And in case anyone out there is wondering, well, Matt, what's the other film that you're referring to? And the other one that did this after this time was Crash at Brokeback Mountain, where picture and director went 5 for 5 in terms of nominations, but they had a split. And that would be the Crash and Brokeback Mountain year would be the last time that would happen, only because we expanded into a Best Picture field. And now it seems like, especially in the year of 10, it seems like if you're in the director lineup, your chances are you're probably going to get into picture as well. So, but enough about that. As far as the Oscars itself, I agree with the Revisionist Almanac crew for picking this out for director, as none of the other nominees really stood out to me as a worthy enough contender to win. And I understand why Warren Beatty won the Oscar for Reds, because it's a very much epic scope, melodrama type story involved overall, and it features a lot of terrific performances from Warren Beatty, who is good in the movie, Diane Keaton, who adds her own charm to it, Jack Nicholson's in it, Gene Hackman plays a small part. I personally really couldn't get invested in the film so much, just because there's not a lot there that I was able to connect with the characters themselves. Like, I appreciated what Warren Beatty was trying to do with the film in terms of discussing about communism and John Reed as a whole and what he was trying to do within America. But I just couldn't emotionally connect to the story. I respect it, I admire it, but I can see why he won director. Also, he was famously overdue at that time, to where it's like, okay, I think he was up to like maybe 10 or 11 nominations at that point overall, and that's including his other nominations he got for picture, original screenplay, actor. So yeah, so it made sense as to why they were going to give it to Warren Beatty. And then I remembered the other nominees. Atlantic City wasn't going to win anything that year. On Golden Pond was not just well respected, but a well-liked movie from the older members of the Academy, but it wasn't enough to garner, I think it was Mark Rydell was the director, to get him that director win, so that wasn't going to happen, period. And Spielberg himself it just wasn't his time yet. Because remember, at the time, Spielberg had taken, it took him a long time for him to finally gain respect from the Academy, especially after Jaws. Like, when Jaws came out, it was a box office hit, but they did not really care about him as a filmmaker. They always saw him as like, oh, he's a popcorn maker type of guy. And it wasn't until, I would say, maybe Close Encounters of the Third Kind, where they started to take him a little bit more seriously as his like auteur visionary filmmaker, so to speak. Hence why he probably got the nomination for Raiders of the Lost Ark. Also, it's a much more riskier project. It's an original concept that even though it's based off of a lot of like old, stuff that Lucas and Spielberg were inspired by in their old days, it's still enough of a risky take, and it became a surprise box office hit. They're like, all right, sure, let's give you a director nomination here for Raiders of the Lost Ark. So yeah, so that's why Warren Beatty ended up winning director, and they just weren't going to give him picture. Also, whenever we have splits like this anyways between picture and director, they usually give director as a like consolation prize of like, hey, we respect your vision, we like it, we admire it, but we're not head over heels with it. There's no underdog. It's not just like there's no underdog that we could root for, so to speak, but it's a film that they respect and admire. However, the film that they did end up going for, which was the eventual Best Picture winner, Chariots of Fire. And this was the first time I'd seen it for anything, whether it's for podcast or non-podcast. And oh boy, this was a pretty incredibly boring Best Picture winner. And yeah, it's not nearly as offensive of a win as, say, Green Book or, as I mentioned before, Crash. But it still has the same problems I had with the more recent Best Picture nominated film we just saw. In fact, I already mentioned it in this discussion, Conclave. And that both suffer from having such low energy and low stakes, when you could have made it more intriguing of a story by having immense passion from its directing or overall technical work. But instead, it's just presented as this boring, toothless take on a sport that's not really interesting to capture on film. And that's saying and that's saying something coming from one who participated in track back in high school, because there are ways you can make that sport interesting and intriguing if not only the way that you present it visually, but even how you're presenting some of the conflicts going on in between those, race sequences in the film. There's a way you could do it, but it's clear that this was not interested in doing that. It's just very much low stakes, low energy type of filmmaking, and sorry, it's just kind of boring to me. No, not kind of. It is boring, I should say. So, Yeah, I didn't really care for Chariots of Fire. Pretty boring. And if you just want to watch a movie regarding to a sport with lots of men sweating and having a lot more energy to it, I guess just watch Challengers because it's a much more compelling and engaging sports drama, I would say. As far as the Indiana Jones films as a whole, in terms of how I would rank them, look, it's really tough because the other three spots are pretty easy to decipher, but in terms of like where I would put Raiders of the Lost Ark or Last Crusade, they're pretty much neck and neck between each other. Like some days I would consider, I want to put Raiders of the Lost Ark as my number one, or maybe Last Crusade as number two, or vice versa. It's kind of tough. So pick your poison there. Number 3, Temple of Doom. I think it's a pretty fun adventure. If anything, watching that a couple years ago in preparation for Dial of Destiny, it reminded me a lot of Evil Dead Rise in that it's a director wanting to have a lot of fun and just make it really goofy and hilarious to watch. And yeah, there's a lot of stupid things in Temple of Doom, but I kind of like how stupid it is at times, especially with the monkey brain sequence. I thought that was hilarious. And the finale is fun to watch too, especially with the little carts that they're riding around on in the mines. I thought that was pretty fun to watch. So yeah, that was cool. Number 4, Dial of Destiny. Yeah, it's just like it's average, I guess. Like it has its moments. Like if nothing else, I was kind of interested to see where it was going in terms of the finale, but it's just not a great movie overall for me. But yeah, I guess that's really what happens when you get another. I don't know. You just get another Indiana Jones film, and you're like, okay, no one really wanted this except for Harrison Ford, and Spielberg wanted to do it, but he's off doing other things. So he's like, all right, I give the project to you, Mangold, and yeah, that's about it. And then number 5, Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. It's boring. It's not good, pretty much, and it's just it falls into the trappings of what I particularly don't like about Spielberg from this era, where he's like his worst tendencies as a director, whether it be the over, I don't know what kind of lighting you would call it, from Janusz Kaminski, to the dragged out sequences in his dialogue sections, to where it's like they're so needlessly long. It's like, why do we need to talk about it in this much length? And there's not a whole lot of great chemistry, and Harrison Ford is just acting like a tough guy, and he's not really doing it that well, because you could tell it's been a while since he played this kind of role before, and it's like you could tell he's sleepwalking through this a bit. But yeah, that's pretty much my rankings of the Indiana Jones movies as a whole. As far as the Mount Rushmore question that I was given by Andrew about Spielberg's films, like where would I put this on there? I would say it's pretty high on the list for sure. I have Schindler's List, Saving Private Ryan, and Jurassic Park. On a rewatch, I might reconsider something like Jaws or E.T. being up there as well, but I'll have to check them out down the road. In fact, I just recently saw Jaws, I think last year or so. I finally rewatched it. I thought it was pretty good. Maybe this summer I might be able to get through it again and maybe show my brother and be like, oh, all right, we'll see how I stand on it. And then same with E.T. I haven't seen that since the IMAX re-release they had a couple years ago. So yeah, I'll find out for myself. And the one technical aspect of the film I do want to bring up, outside of the editing by Michael Kahn, which I've already brought up before, is I want to talk about John Williams' score in this, as I felt it enhanced the film's momentum in sections of the film, especially during the fight scene with Indy and the big muscular guy, where they're fighting near the plane and the propeller's getting closer and closer to Indy, and then he's able to swoop around and things like that. I thought that was a pretty cool sequence they had, and really engaging and entertaining to watch. And even the opening of the film showcases an eerie atmosphere when we see our lead and his team wandering through the forest, and we're like, what's going on? Like, Indy is kept in the shadows, and we never see what he looks like until he uses his whip on one of the guys who is about to kill him. So I thought that was pretty cool. But listen, I could go on and on with my review of Raiders of the Lost Ark, but I'd be boring you to tears at this point. You know what it is at this point. It's a fun adventure film to throw on, and there's nothing else. It's a solid flick from a director who's made a lot of wonderful films. So thank you, Mr. Spielberg, for delivering us another great movie. And as far as everyone else goes, listening to this episode, I hope you had a great time listening to our discussion. Thank you, Andrew, for having me on board to talk about this in a little, small blurb, so to speak. And just like how I say it with my show, and I'll say it here again, I hope to see everyone at the movies.
Hi, y'all. It's Everett with Watch This Film blog. For those of you who don't know me, I am a film blogger who started a blog a few years back counting down the 1,000 greatest films of all time based on a formula that I came up with in college and have kind of tweaked since then. And I've been posting reviews of those movies as I go. And as I watch them, I also do occasionally some like movie tournaments on the blog's Instagram account, on the story of like movies or movie years or actors and actresses is what I've got going on right now. And right now the blog itself is we're in the 400s. By the time this podcast drops, hopefully we'll be somewhere right around 475, 460, somewhere in that range, based on just kind of the stuff that I'm watching. I've got to catch up on the writing side of it. But if you want to follow me on any of the socials, you can check out the blog. That's on Instagram at Watch This Film blog. You can also follow my personal Blue Sky account if you want to interact maybe a little bit more person to person on like just talk about the movies that we watch and those kind of things. That's at ev-manser, ev-mansur bsky.social. If that's something that you want to check out and that you want to interact with me that way, you can also just find the blog on the internet, the old fashioned way, as it were, at wtfilm.org. If you like what I have to say, check me out. If you don't like what I have to say, come yell at me or don't, please. This is my very first actual podcast experience, and I just wanted to thank Andrew for putting this together, giving us the opportunity to share our feelings and for me to talk through my thoughts and emotions and feelings about what I consider to be one of my favorite films of all time. It's in my top 25 favorites, Raiders of the Lost Ark. It is a fantastic film, and I'm going to kind of frame this whole discussion as a back and forth between the questions that Andrew has sent and myself. So his first question that he asks is, what are your memories of watching this film? And I remember growing up, I was born in the late 90s, well after all of the original Indiana Jones trilogy had come out, before, obviously, the two more recent installments had released. And growing up, I watched a lot of movies with my family. My parents were really big on making sure that we watched movies, and every Friday night we had family movie night. I watched Star Wars at a young age. I watched Lord of the Rings when I was in elementary school, but for some reason, and my dad loves Indiana Jones, but for some reason, Indiana Jones did not really, I guess, like make its way onto a fully realized watch for me until I was probably 10, 11, something like that. I had seen snippets of it on TV, on AMC, on TNT, probably on like Spike back when that was a thing. And like I knew different scenes from the movie. Like I knew the iconic, like steal the idol, put the sand down, boulders rolling after him. I knew that. I knew the chasing the Nazis in the trucks, and you're like, he's got his whip and he's crawling back up as he's dragging on the ground. I knew him running through town and the guy's got the sword, and instead of like getting into a fight with him, he shoots him, right? Sorry, I guess all of these are kind of spoilers, but I mean, you're probably listening to this because you know what this is all about. But I had seen all these scenes individual and like separate from each other on just like little sit down. I'm gonna like, here's 30 minutes of this, or like, oh, we caught the back half of Indiana Jones. And I never put together that like they were all part of the same Indiana Jones movie. I was like, oh, that must be something from Temple of Doom, or that must be from uh, The Last Crusade. I think what ended up happening is I think The Last Crusade, I sat down and I was able to watch the whole thing front to back uh, one afternoon. And I realized like, oh, none of that stuff that I've seen before is in this movie. I maybe like, what's the deal with that? And then I was like, I really enjoyed it. And so my dad and I think they're marathoning them like back to back on something. And so we just kind of sat down, and Raiders was coming back up. So we watched Raiders, and it was great. And it really, like, that opening sequence of Raiders is amazing. From the moment that the Paramount logo fades into the mountain, just the silence, you see this like awesome adventure hero. It's like the perfect introduction to him because he's so imposing. But then after the whole ordeal, he loses and he goes back to being kind of a dweeby college professor. And it's this really cool juxtaposition that's set up there. And I just remember loving that part. And like, I mean, obviously it hooks you from the jump. And then everything else that comes afterward, it just keeps being good and keeps being entertaining and keeps being engaging. And it is like probably the best adventure movie of all time. Um, Depending on how you want to like define that genre, I guess. But for me, it definitely is that. And I have since seen it many, many times. Anytime it's on TV, I'll stop and watch a little bit of it, realize I can quote the whole thing, frustrate my wife a little bit while quoting the whole thing, and I love it. And it's going to be a movie that I will always go back to. It's a movie that I own physical versions of. It's a movie that I will recommend to people if it's like, hey, how have you not seen this movie? Like, this is one that is so easily accessible. I feel like it is one that you've got to see. And I guess I'm kind of getting into the next question of, does the film hold up 40 plus years later? Like, yeah, it does. Like, is it maybe the most diverse cast? Is casting John Rhys Davies as an Egyptian man maybe a little bit questionable in, I don't know, 2025? Yeah, sure. But this was 1981, right? Like, there were so many like bigger snafus going on in uh, film, the world of film, and in all of that. That is something that's pretty minor to me. I think the action holds up. I think the visuals hold up. Like, there's that one kind of goofy part at the beginning where you can definitely tell like it's a dummy on the spikes, or like the face melting like is very clearly fake, right? Like, those are not real human bodies. I remember as a kid, the first time I watched that scene, my parents were like, "Oh, you've got to cover your eyes," and I like looked between my fingers, and I was like, "That's not real." Like, why would they think I would think that was real? Uh, but it's still like, it doesn't take me out of the movie because of that, right? It almost endears me to the movie even more because it's so authentically filmed, right? It's cinema. It's watching something that I enjoy. And yeah, it's got these weird moments that don't look incredibly authentic, but it's also got these amazing, super real, like him. Like, I think the car chase scene where he is fighting Nazis from car to car and like being dragged along, I think that is one of the coolest scenes. I'm sure it was a pain to shoot. Um, and I think it's fantastic. Which again kind of gets into the next question. Do I have a favorite sequence or scene? It probably is that, like, from the like airplane fight where he's fighting the big dude at the airplane, and the propellers. You've seen the movie. If you haven't, it's an iconic scene. You'll see it. It's cool. And everything starts blowing up, and then they start driving away with the Ark. That whole chase sequence is really, really. I guess this is a movie full of chase sequences, because there's also the market chase sequence. But I think the car chase sequence is probably my favorite. Just because it's so physical, it's so gritty. You get kind of everything of like what is going on in this movie. You get the Nazis, you get Indy with his whip, you get him getting the crap kicked out of him by like the Nazi heavies, but you also have him ultimately kind of winning and kind of having to outsmart people, and you have him overcoming these odds while also still like only partially winning. And then it's like this moment of, yes, okay, finally, like we've made it, and it sets up for that back act, which kind of gives closure to everything, where the whole time it's this transition from, hey, we've got to get this thing, to, hey, what is this thing? And I think it's a really, really fun sequence when he comes riding down on the horse, and you're like, he's riding a horse after trucks and car. I mean, it's the 1930s, so speeds were probably a little bit more comparable back then. But yeah, it's a really, really great scene, really great sequence. So much fun. I would, every time that is on, I stop and I watch. Like if I'm flipping, which I don't flip through channels a whole lot these days, but if I happen to see like Indiana Jones is on the little menu, and it's in the middle, I'll like click it to see where it's at, and if that scene is on, I watch it, like no questions asked, and it's great. The next question asks, were we, so not me, but Andrew and his guest, and also the online voters, which was me, correct in giving this Best Picture for 1981? I think hindsight has to almost say yes. 1981, if you go back and like listen to their episode on it, they do a pretty good job breaking a lot of stuff down. I don't necessarily agree with the hate that Chariots of Fire got. We'll get into that here in a second, but I think of the films that have lasted from 1981, there is none quite as enduring as Raiders. Like it's a movie that is so iconic that you can just call it Raiders and people know what you're talking about, unless you're, I don't know, in Las Vegas or something like that, and they're like, "Oh, you're talking about the team." No, but people know what Raiders is. It's iconic. It's got so many good quotes, so many good scenes, so well made. And like I said, it really does hold up. And the parts that don't hold up probably didn't look great even back then. And so like, it's just authentically itself. It's also the product of two very passionate filmmakers, right? Lucas and Spielberg kind of getting together to make this adventure film that they would have wanted to watch, and you just feel the passion for it. You feel how much at least Harrison Ford wanted to be a part of it, and how much he enjoys it, right? Like you continue to see that in his career as he continues, well, I don't know if he still is after Dial of Destiny, but up through a point was continued to want to play this character because he loved it so much. And like that passion transfers to the audience. And so, yeah, I think whether you're looking at it in the context of back then or the context of today, I think like part of the reason why, as far as I can understand it, Andrew has kind of set up this podcast, not this specific episode, but like in general, is to look back with the benefit of hindsight and correct the lack of foresight that the Academy voters tend to have, right? And this is the movie that endures, right? This is the every that lasts. This is the movie that everyone is going back and watching over and over and over again. And like, does every year have a movie that is like this iconic? Absolutely not. But 1981 did, and this is that film. This is that movie. And it absolutely deserves Best Picture. Now, the next question asks, do I have thoughts on the actual Best Picture winner that year, Chariots of Fire? And here's what I will say. I recently revisited Chariots of Fire. If you want to read my review of it, it is on the blog. It was on the list. It's lower than where I am now. I hated Chariots of Fire the first time that I watched it. Now, the first time that I watched it, I was a middle schooler. I was about the same age that I was actually probably the first time that I watched Raiders, the first time that I watched Chariots of Fire. Now, I wanted to revisit Raiders, and I have watched Raiders many, many times since then. I've seen Chariots of Fire once since then, and that was because it was on the blog's list of movies that I had to watch. I think I understand why it won Best Picture that year. The Academy is not big on genre films, and so Raiders being nominated kind of was the win for Raiders in that moment. A movie like Reds is obviously great, right? It's this epic, this kind of passion project from oh shoot, I'm blanking on his name right now. Warren Beatty. But it's not necessarily I mean, this is the beginning of the Reagan administration, right? Yes, the Cold War is coming to an end, but we're still not totally sure that we want to, as a, I guess, a media propaganda culture, humanize the Soviets just yet. And so, yeah, I think that's probably why that suffered. On Golden Pond is too stuffy. I will say, I think that's my take on it. And Atlantic City, I think, was that year's kind of indie darling, which, excluding Rocky and a few, yeah, probably just Rocky, honestly. They were still not quite at that point yet in awarding Best Picture. Chariots of Fire is a sports film that is decently acted, that has a great score, an iconic score, a score that beat John Williams' Raiders score for Best Original Score that year, which is wild. And I think those are two of probably like the 10 most iconic scores of all time. So there's that. It's inoffensive, but it has something to say. Do I love what it has to say? Does everything that it has to say feel overly relevant? No, but I think it is more entertaining sometimes than Andrew lets on. But maybe also part of that is me coming from a place of, like, the first time I watched this movie was in the context of like a Bible class that I was in that was like, hey, wasn't Eric Liddell this great dude for not wanting to run on a Sunday? And now I have the like benefit of hindsight to be like, no, that's not really the point of what this movie was. And so I get to enjoy the facets of like competition and stuff that it's about, and about what it means to be an athlete and what it means to be a competitor and those kinds of things. And I think that's that was more interesting to me than the, hey, that guy didn't run on Sunday storyline that I was kind of introduced to it with. And so because of that, I think I enjoy the movie more. And I did. I appreciated the two leads and their performances, and I think it's pretty good. And so, like, I get why it won Best Picture. It's inoffensive. It's got some good visuals, some great music, and some solid acting with Ian Holm kind of like as the elder statesman, I guess you would say. So, do I hate it? No. Again, in hindsight, it wasn't the best film of the year even at the time, but in hindsight, it makes sense that it won, and also it makes sense that it should not win any revisitings that 1981 gets, if that makes sense. So now jumping back to Raiders and really the Indiana Jones franchise as a whole, the next question asks, how do I rank each film in the Indiana Jones franchise? And so I'll go bottom to top. I do think Dial of Destiny is the worst, but like closely followed by Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Crystal Skull came out when I was 13. I had watched all of the originals. I was hyped for it. I went to see it with friends and family, and we all kind of went away like, oh, that was not like the others. Dial of Destiny is fine. I will probably never watch it again. That's kind of where I'm at on Dial of Destiny, and that's why it's at the bottom. I have rewatched Crystal Skull. It remains fine as well. There's some moments in it that like are unforgettable because of how kind of goofy they are. And so in that, it feels maybe more like an Indiana Jones movie than Dial of Destiny does. And so that's probably why I have them Dial 5 and Crystal Skull 4. Then after that, there's like a huge gap, as I would expect in probably a lot of people's rankings. Then I probably go, honestly, today, if you would ask me like a year ago, I probably would have had this in a different order. But today, I have The Last Crusade, then Temple of Doom, and then Raiders at 1. I go 3, 2, 1, 3, 2, 1. I go back and forth on Last Crusade versus Temple. I think Temple gets better every time I watch it. But maybe it's just because I give Temple the most time between rewatches of the kind of original trilogy. But every time I go back to it, I'm like, oh, this is really fun. This is really good. This is really interesting. Yeah, I enjoy it a lot. And right now, I'm kind of high on it. And I don't want this to sound like I don't like Last Crusade, because I do like Last Crusade. It is one of my favorite films of all time. I mean, all three of these are like, if this was a trilogy and you didn't have 4 and 5, like this is one of the best trilogies ever. I mean, it is one of the best trilogies ever, and then they added stuff to it after the fact. Um, but I think some Last Crusade, it kind of depends on where I'm at in life, but sometimes it's just like a little bit too much going on. It's not as clean, maybe, as the other two. Now, is there some crazy problematic, like, I guess you had presentation of South Asian and Indian and Hindu culture in Temple of Doom? Absolutely. Has George Lucas come out and been like, hey, I wouldn't have had them eat monkey brains. I just thought it was kind of a crazy thing to eat, but I love curry and naan and all this. Like, it's born of ignorance, I think. And like those two are, again, far, like, there's a pretty decent gap between 2 and 3 and Raiders. Raiders is by far the best. Are there some parts of 2 and 3 that I like better than some parts of Raiders? Yeah, absolutely. I think the trials in Last Crusade, I think the motorcycle chase in Last Crusade, goofy as it is, I think those two scenes are really, really good, are some of the best Indiana Jones that we have. I think the romance and or lack thereof of romance in Temple of Doom is maybe more interesting because it feels like the woman has a little bit of back and forth, and there's a little bit more agency in that romance in Temple of Doom than there are in the other films, mainly just because they didn't know each other going in. And so there's not all the baggage that Marion kind of brings with her to Raiders. But then, yeah, Raiders is still by far the best film. It's fantastic. There's no part of Raiders that I'm like, ooh, I'm just like, oh yes, everything about Raiders is great. The next question asks, is Harrison Ford more famous for Indiana Jones or Han Solo? And so I did a very, very small poll of my parents and my wife. And I asked them, when you think about Harrison Ford, do you think more about Indiana Jones or Han Solo? My dad said Indiana Jones. My mom said Han Solo. They were both kids or I get like teens in the late 70s, early 80s. Kids into teens, I guess. And they split on. My dad is a huge Star Wars fan and introduced me to Star Wars, but I think my mom enjoys Star Wars more than she enjoys Indiana Jones because of maybe the grittiness of Indiana Jones, if that makes sense. My wife, though, surprised me, only kind of, I guess, and said Indiana Jones. But I guess it's not really surprising because she really does love Indiana Jones. She loves Temple of Doom. She would have Temple of Doom at the top of her list, and I think she would be happy to hear me say that I have it at 2 right now. And she is part of the reason for that as well, because we enjoy watching that movie together. She does not love Star Wars as much as I do. I was a huge Star Wars fan. I ran a Star Wars quotes Twitter account that like 10 people from my high school followed when I was in high school. I read a lot of the books. I watched all the movies. I watched all the movies many, many times. And so I think Harrison Ford is probably more famous for being Han Solo because like that is what made him famous. At the same time, I do tend to think of Indiana Jones when I think of Harrison Ford because I feel like that's kind of more of who he is. He has that, yes, he's got the like the badassery, but he's also got the oh shucks, oh dang guys, why is that girl blinking her eyes at me saying love you on him? Right, he's got the kind of not nerd, but he's not just a monolith. And also I recognize that like he prefers Indiana Jones to Han Solo. And so I think that's part of why I think about that for him too. I don't know that I guess, I mean, Alden Ehrenreich got to play the young Han Solo. I was going to say, I don't know if anybody could replace either of those characters, but I did actually appreciate him in Han Solo. But I say that because the next question asks, if they were to recast Indiana Jones with a contemporary actor, who would I pick and why? There was a moment where I thought they were going to recast Indiana Jones when the first Jurassic World movie came out and Chris Pratt was running around in that khaki vest, uh, riding motorcycles, shooting guns. I mean, obviously he's doing stuff with dinosaurs, but there were some shots in there that were reminiscent of of him that were reminiscent of shots of Indiana Jones, specifically in Raiders. And with the benefit of hindsight, I realized it's probably more of an homage to Spielberg's filmmaking and not trying to turn Chris Pratt, thankfully, into Indiana Jones. I don't know if there's a contemporary actor who could do Indiana Jones because you need someone who's in that like late 30s kind of range and is also semi gritty but ruggedly handsome. I mean, like I think it could be interesting, depending on it would depend on kind of the era, I guess, that you wanted to put Indiana Jones in. I think you could get away with doing something like a John David Washington. Like I feel like your like big American action hero, like Tenet, is the one right now. I mean, like you could do Michael B. Jordan, but Michael B. Jordan is like hot, right? Not that John David Washington is not unattractive, but he's not the heartthrob that Michael B. Jordan is. But I think, and so I think because of that, he could fit into that kind of dual role of, yes, I am this strong, confident character because we've seen him do that, but also, yeah, I've got to kind of be geeky and dweeby at the same time because I'm also a college professor. And I think he could play that really, really well. I would be very interested to see what that would look like. I don't know what era you would put that in. Like, would you keep it in the Nazis? Would you put it in like the Cold War era? I don't. That's what's so hard. I think Indiana Jones is a character that kind of only exists in a certain time period, and so I think also the movies can only kind of exist as long as that original actor and character exists. It's hard. Uh, is Raiders on my Steven Spielberg Mount Rushmore? That is a fantastic question because I think Spielberg is the director whose films I have seen more of than any other director. Fun facts. Thank you, Letterboxd Stats, for that shout out. Please don't follow my Letterboxd. I only rate and log the movies. But if you want to, you can. I'm not going to give you that handle though. No, I think it definitely is on the Spielberg Rushmore for me. I think it's tough, but I think I go Raiders, Saving Private Ryan, Jurassic Park, and Jaws as my Spielberg Mount Rushmore, and maybe even in that order. I think all of those kind of hit the different things that he's great at. Now, I have not seen Schindler's List, and I have not seen E.T. since I have been a grown adult. So those might factor in somewhere, but I'm comfortable saying I think those are my four. If you're like four favorites, Steven Spielberg. That is my Steven Spielberg Mount Rushmore. Now, I do think, as this next question asks, how important is John Williams' musical score to the story and the character? I think John Williams is pretty important to a lot of those films, actually. 3 of those films, at least, have pretty iconic John Williams scores attached to them. All of them incredibly well known. The Raiders score, obviously, the yeah, yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Is great. There was, when I was in elementary school, I vividly remember there was a kid a few grades older than me at our talent show who got up full dressed as Indiana Jones, like fedora, whip at his side, everything, and just in the microphone, no instruments, no backing tracks, just ba 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 for like 3-4 minutes, and that was his act for the talent show. And it's like everybody knew exactly, like he got up, and everybody knew exactly what was going on, and he did the music, and we are like, yes, that's Indiana Jones. Even like everyone knew that. And I think you play the score, and it is kind of synonymous, right? They played Harrison Ford at some awards show a couple years back with it, or maybe they played him off with it, one or the other. But I remember that and being excited about that because that meant that they were acknowledging the Indiana Jones and not just focusing on the Han Solo. And the way that is kind of like the theme is synonymous with the character in a lot of ways, just like the Imperial March is synonymous with like a Darth Vader. Um, Sometimes they just do become, you hear it and you're like, oh yes, I know exactly who that is. Uh, and I think Indiana Jones is one of those. I think it does help the movie a lot. I think it keeps things moving, as all good film scores do. And I think it's one of the best. I love it. Andrew closes with two kind of loaded questions that I'm excited to answer. I'm going to read them both, and I'll kind of answer them in a package thing. The first says, does it bother you that the film's plot would have played out exactly as it did with or without Indiana's involvement in the story? And then the second asks, is the enduring power of Indiana Jones baked into the fact that he's often failing and in turn making him more vulnerable? I think there's right. Like, obviously, the reason why the story would have happened with or without him is because he fails, like he keeps failing over and over and over again. I do want to push back a little bit and say that the story would not have happened exactly the same. I don't think Marion makes it out of that Nazi encounter at the very beginning of the movie if Indiana Jones is not there already to help her out. Everything else then goes exactly the same, but probably on an even faster schedule because they would have had both sides to begin with, and they would have known where to dig, and they wouldn't have had to dig at the wrong spot and then yoink it out from under him. That big dude doesn't get cut up by a plane, and the Ark probably makes it to Berlin and doesn't get tested on an island. And honestly, Hitler probably gets his face melted off. So maybe that's an even bigger failure for Indiana Jones. But right, I don't think it goes exactly as it would without Indiana Jones' involvement. I think Indiana Jones keeps complicating things. And ultimately, he does win at the end, even though he keeps failing over and over and over again, right? He thinks Marion dies. He's almost poisoned by a motorcycle monkey man. Harrison Ford had bowel issues on set and didn't do a fight with the sword man and chose to shoot him instead because he needed to use the bathroom, right? Like, even the human has these like fails kind of baked into it. The iconic Belloc quote of, once again, Dr. Jones, we see there is nothing you can possess that I cannot take from you. Right? I don't know if that was exactly what he says, but that line is kind of the soul of specifically Raiders, because there's less of that failing in the movies that go down. But I think part of what makes Harrison Ford so good at being Indiana Jones, I don't know if it's what makes the character enduring as much as it is that makes Harrison Ford a success at being Indiana Jones, is he sells it. He makes those faces of like, oh shoot, I've messed up, or oh no, oh, like how did this happen? Like, he's got such a great emotive face, and he makes you enjoy those moments of the character's failure. It's not that it's like relatable, even though obviously we do like to see our heroes fail, right? If every hero always won all the time, wouldn't be an interesting story. But it's because he makes it laughable almost, even in the midst of the toughness. And I think that's kind of the beauty of Indiana Jones, to kind of close all of this out. The beauty of Raiders is that you enjoy the entire movie. Like, you are having a good time the whole time you are watching that movie, even though things are going wrong a lot. You're still confident in the hero, despite the fact that there's no reason for you to be confident in the hero, except that you look at him, like you see Harrison Ford, and he's got this quiet confidence, despite the fact that he also has this kind of quiet humility. and you're like, oh, okay, it's going to be okay. And I think that's what makes specifically Raiders so good. Obviously, the score, the direction, the effects, minus the face melting and the guy on the sticks that I mentioned already. The sets. But really, it does come down to the characters. And the characters are memorable, and the characters are either likable or hateable, depending on whether they are heroes or villains. But they're also maybe a little bit more complex than just a pure black and white. You have this hardcore action hero who also gets flustered when a girl winks at him, right? You have this hardcore action hero who's maybe a little bit of a woman, a lot of bit of a womanizer, in fact. But like, that's kind of just how he lives and not who he is, which doesn't excuse that kind of behavior. But I think it's a great character, and it's a great film, and it's a film that I enjoy going back to every single time. There's never a moment where it's like, hey, I'm going to turn on Indiana Jones, or when someone says like, hey, I want to watch Raiders, or I want to watch one of the Indiana Jones movies, and I'm like, oh, are you serious? Like, really? Today? No, it's like, oh yeah, I've got time. Yeah, which one? Put it on. We starting from the beginning, or is it just like on TV? Either way, I'm watching it. And that is the beauty of Raiders and the beauty of this film, and why I think it is deserving and is the best film of 1981. I have talked for a really freaking long time, so I do apologize, Andrew. If you need to cut any of this for time, please do. It's been a pleasure talking about this movie. I could probably go on for another 40 minutes at least. But again, I am Everett from Watch This Film Blog. You can find me on Instagram at Watch This Film Blog. You can find the blog on the internet, wtfilm.org, and you can find me on Blue Sky if you want to talk about movies or yell at me about going too long or my bad opinions about Indiana Jones or about Chariots of Fire. That is ev-manser.bsky.social. Again, thank you so much, Andrew, for letting me be a part. If you want me to feature on anyone who's listening's podcasts, reach out on any of those socials. My life's about to be a little bit busy at the start of the summer, but come September, October, I will probably be a little bit more free if you want to have me on. I really did enjoy this, and I really do love Raiders. Thank you so much. I'll talk to y'all soon, hopefully.
Hi, this is Steve Anderson. I'm a director, storyboard artist, and author. I've directed the animated films Meet the Robinsons from 2007, Winnie the Pooh from 2011, and also directed on season 1 of Monsters at Work, airing on Disney+. And I'm here to talk about one of my absolute favorite movies of all time, Raiders of the Lost Ark. First question, what are your memories of watching this film? It's interesting because I have been a lifelong Indiana Jones fan. I saw Raiders in the theater in 1981 when it first came out, but for some reason I didn't engage with it. I enjoyed it. I had fun with it, but it didn't really hit me the way Star Wars had or Empire Strikes Back a few years earlier. Those movies really packed a wallop. But Raiders I was very casual about until fast forward to Christmas of 1983 when our family got a VCR for Christmas, and my parents bought 3 videotapes to go with it. 2 were Disney cartoon compilation tapes, which was a no-brainer for me as a big Disney animation nerd when I was a kid, and still am. And then the other one was Raiders on VHS. And I spent that entire Christmas break certainly watching all 3 of those tapes, but I watched Raiders more than those Disney animation tapes, which was a big deal for me. I watched Raiders over and over and over again. I just got so drawn into it, drawn into the character of Indiana Jones, the adventure of the whole thing, the scope, the scale, the score. the fun of it. I just loved it, and that really then is when Raiders and the character of Indiana Jones really got its hooks in me. And certainly then 5 or 6 months later when Temple of Doom came out the following year, that was it. I was hooked. I was an Indiana Jones fan for life. So I've continued to watch Raiders, of course, over and over in my life. I taught a story class at Cal Arts in the character animation department for many years, and that was my end of the year class. It was a 3-hour class, and we watched Raiders and stopped it along the way, and I talked through it and analyzed it, broke it down in terms of story structure, storytelling, staging, just cinematics, all that stuff. So Raiders has kind of been with me both as a fan and as a student of movies and storytelling, and it's just extremely special movie for me. Next question: does the film hold up 40 plus years later? I say absolutely yes. I think Lucas and Spielberg being such students of cinema. A film like Raiders is made with that love of classic cinematic storytelling. It's all of those fundamentals. It's great composition. It's great staging. It's how to move the camera smartly, lighting, editing, sound design, all that stuff. All classic cinematic storytelling fundamentals. And as a result, I think that helps Raiders really stay relevant, because it looks like it could be made at any time. It could be made in the 30s and 40s. It could be made today. There's no real trickery that, camera trickery or filmmaking mumbo jumbo that dates it. Also, I think it helps that it's a period piece. That certainly keeps it from feeling dated. And also adding in, we're going to talk about John Williams' score in a little bit, but certainly adding in that score. Also, very classic Hollywood. Also, I feel like it could have been at home accompanying a 30s and 40s movie, or a movie of today, and certainly a movie of the 80s. I think all of those things combined has kept that movie relevant and very timeless. Do you have a favorite sequence or scene? That's really tough, because there are so many sequences in Raiders that I absolutely love. I think for me, the one that stands out the most that I'd want to talk about would be the map room sequence, where early in Act 2, Indiana Jones goes down into the map room with his Staff of Ra and the headpiece, and finds the location of the Well of the Souls, where the Ark of the Covenant is. There's so many reasons I love that sequence. I think the main one is because there's no dialogue, because it is a quiet moment where we just watch Indiana Jones being in his element, pursuing his passion, thinking, puzzling, and doing. He's not talking about anything. There's no other character down there that he has to explain to them what they're doing, what he's doing. He doesn't talk to himself to explain to the audience what he's doing. He just does it. It was expertly set up earlier in the film with a great scene of dialogue, of exposition that told us all about what the map room was and the headpiece and all that. So we don't need any more exposition. Now we can just watch it all play out. And I love that about that scene. And I think that's something that the film series gradually lost sight of, is the fact that Indiana Jones is a physical character. Why we love him is because of what he does and how he does it. His physical, active qualities. And I think the movies had become much more dialogue heavy, dialogue focused, more about what he says than what he does. And this map room sequence is just behavior, and I think it's brilliant. Of course, coupled with the beautiful score cue from John Williams, such dynamics to it, starting off very mysterious, plays the comedy when we intercut between Indiana Jones and Sala on the outside. And then the wonderful build as Indiana Jones puts the pieces together and then uses the headpiece to finally find that location. We have that great, big sunburst that comes through the headpiece, and the music crescendos giving us that sense of victory. We've done it. We've found it. But also really kicking in that Ark theme that he has teased a few times throughout the score. But this is really the first time that it really kicks in, and then is going to come in full force at the end when they open the Ark. So giving that sense of the bigger biblical stakes that are involved in this. So just a beautiful scene, brilliant scene of visual storytelling, and I think it's wonderful. Okay, next question. Were we, the podcast, correct in awarding this as the actual best film of 1981? It also won revised Oscars for direction, Steven Spielberg, and supporting actress Karen Allen. Hands down, yes, I would say. I mean, I hold this film in such high regard. I think everyone in all capacities on this film deserves an Oscar, because I think it was just made at the highest level of the movie craft. But it does bring up an interesting conversation, one I think people have often about Oscars, and particularly Best Picture nominees and Best Picture winners. Sometimes movies that are either nominated or win the Best Picture Oscar, a year or two later, nobody remembers them anymore. And the movies that stick more in public consciousness aren't the kind of movies that get nominated for Best Picture. So there's that question of, all right, is it the Best Picture at the time, or is it the Best Picture through time, over time, I should say. And so Raiders is interesting because the other nominees, it was Raiders of the Lost Ark, it was Atlantic City, Reds, Chariots of Fire, and On Golden Pond. Now, full disclosure, I have only seen, of those 5, Raiders and On Golden Pond, so I can't speak to my feelings about the actual those other movies. But certainly they were praised at the time. I remember when they came out, they were praised. People went to see them, and they were honored with Academy Award nominations. Raiders kind of being the odd man out there, because Raiders is definitely a big, broad audience, kind of mainstream Hollywood blockbuster popcorn movie, and those other 4 are not. So it's interesting that it got nominated. Usually, today or after 1981, 82, a lot of those types of movies would not ever get nominated for Best Picture. So it definitely speaks to the impact that Raiders had when it came out. But I would say if you showed that list of Best Picture nominees or movie titles to current generations, I would wager that the only film they would recognize, the only title overall in general, would be Raiders, because that movie has stuck so strongly in the public consciousness, in pop culture. Everyone knows who Indiana Jones is, even if they haven't seen the movies. They know who that character is. So certainly when you talk about a movie that has had an impact on our culture, and if you use that to define what makes a movie the best, Raiders, no question, deserves to be the Best Picture. And as I said, everyone on the film, I think, Oscars all around to all of them, because it's an incredible achievement. Do you have any thoughts on the actual Best Picture winner from that year, Chariots of Fire? So as I said, I never saw Chariots of Fire, so I couldn't comment on it. I do remember when it came out. I remember it was very highly praised. It was a big part of popular culture. The Chariots of Fire theme was on the radio. So it certainly made an impact at the time. Now, again, maybe it hasn't quite stood the test of time. I'm sure there are still fans of Chariots of Fire, but I would not say it it made a huge pop cultural impact that has lasted today. So, anyways, that would be my only thoughts that I could offer on Chariots of Fire. How do you rank each film in the Indiana Jones franchise? To me, I rank them in the order that they were made. I think Raiders is the top, is the best, and the other ones, none of the other ones matched Raiders. I think Temple of Doom is a close second. Of the original three, I think Last Crusade is my least favorite. There are things that I do like about it, but I think overall it is in my opinion, and this may be controversial, I think it is a weak Indiana Jones film. I think it's almost like a farce, a comedy, a Marx Brothers film. No, pun intended. The Marx Brothers are referenced in that film. And so I don't think it's at that same level. I don't think it has the weight and the stakes and the power that Raiders does. And certainly the final two, Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny, were very disappointing to me. And so I rank them in the order they were made. Is Harrison Ford more famous for Indiana Jones or Han Solo? This is a really tough question that I've been racking my brain over, trying to figure that out, because if it were not for Han Solo, there would be no Harrison Ford as Indiana Jones. And I think certainly those of us that were kids at the time that were big Star Wars fans when Raiders came out, that's one of the reasons why we wanted to even see Raiders, was because the dude that plays Han Solo was in it. And we all loved Han Solo. He was a super cool character. That said, I feel like there is more of Harrison Ford in the character of Indiana Jones. I feel like he certainly put a lot of himself into Han Solo, but whenever I read about the production history of these films, and certainly with Raiders, how much of it was they had to be really nimble and sort of off the cuff and a little improvisatory, and looking at that scene, considering that scene of when Indiana Jones shoots the swordsman instead of does the big fight, that was Harrison Ford. That was Harrison Ford's idea, and that's something Harrison Ford would do, I think. I don't know Harrison Ford, but my impression of the guy himself is that, yeah, he just shoot the guy. I don't think you can separate Indiana Jones from Harrison Ford. I don't know. I think he's more famous for Indiana Jones, but that also might be my bias. I love Star Wars, but I'm a bigger Indiana Jones fan, so it's hard to know if I'm talking through my bias or not. But I would say that Harrison Ford is more famous for Indiana Jones. If they were to recast Indiana Jones with a contemporary actor, who would you pick and why? I refuse to answer this question because I will not accept the character being recast. That people can do whatever they want. I will not be party to any rebooting or recasting of Indiana Jones of any kind. Harrison Ford, as I said just a second ago, Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones. A lot of people use the example of James Bond. Well, there's been multiple people that played James Bond. You can just recast James Bond. Why can't you recast Indiana Jones? I think it's totally different because James Bond came from novels. James Bond came from another source. So they are adaptations, basically. You are adapting a literary character into another medium, into the screen. Indiana Jones was created for the movies by Steven Spielberg and played by Harrison Ford. And as I said a second ago, I think Harrison Ford is Indiana Jones. I think there is so much. That character is the way he is, and we love that character because of what Harrison Ford brought to that role. And I don't think you can separate the two. Therefore, I will not accept a world where anyone else plays Indiana Jones but Harrison Ford. That's just me. That's my take, and I'm sticking by it. Is Raiders of the Lost Ark on your Steven Spielberg Mount Rushmore? what would be your Spielberg Mount Rushmore? I would say for sure Raiders is on there. Absolutely, 150% Raiders. For me, I think it would also be E.T. I would say probably Jaws. And then I would include a film called Empire of the Sun that he did in, I think it was 86 it came out, which I think is kind of a real gem. I find that I think it's not a perfect movie, but I really love it. There's some storytelling in it that I just think is really stunning. I think emotionally it's really beautiful, and it maybe just hit me at a certain time when I first saw it in the theater. It just really stuck with me, and I've always gone back to it and enjoyed it. So that would be my Mount Rushmore: Raiders, E.T., Jaws, and Empire of the Sun. Okay, next question. How important is the John Williams musical score to the story and the character? Inextricable, I don't think. Again, the way I've been saying that Harrison Ford and the character Indiana Jones are linked. I think the Indiana Jones films, particularly Raiders, and John Williams' score they're just inseparable. You can't separate them. Again, speaking from a pop culture standpoint, I think that Indiana Jones March is so recognizable. I think anybody, even if they haven't seen, I'd wager even if they haven't seen any of the movies, as soon as they hear bum, bada bada bum, bum, bada bada bum, they know what's coming, and they can hum bum ba bum 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 ba bum. Everybody knows that. So just from a recognition standpoint, and again from a cultural standpoint, I think the Indiana Jones March is a huge part of that. But then just the storytelling of John Williams' score, how adept he is at playing all those different, all the different tones and shifts that go throughout the film. Playing the heroism, playing the action, the stakes of the action, the danger that's in there, the love story, of course, the comedy without being absurd, without being ridiculous, like the Cairo basket chase. That there's a lot of comedy in that scene, and when you listen to the cue by itself, he's definitely playing the comedy, but it's done in a very understated way that gives you the feeling without overdoing it. And of course, as we said earlier from one of the other questions, the Ark theme is just magnificent, and how that pays off at the end in that final scene where they open up the Ark. I mean, it's just incredible. His score is unbelievable, and I think for a film that I would guess is 80-85% no dialogue, the score is even that much more important. All the dialogue scenes that are in Raiders are smart, and they have a point. They reveal character. They reveal exposition. They give us what we need. But everything else is carried by the actors, by the camera, and by the score. So, you have to have a great score if you're telling this kind of film, if you're telling this kind of making a film with this kind of visual storytelling, and there's no question that John Williams' score for Raiders is just genius, definitely. And then, is the enduring power of Indiana Jones baked into the fact that he is often failing and in turn making him more vulnerable? Oh yeah. There's no question in my mind that is one of the reasons why he is so beloved. He's not perfect. He is one of the things I love about Raiders and Temple of Doom is that he gets the crap beat out of him, and you feel it, and he feels it. He does not try to pretend it doesn't hurt, and I think that's wonderful. It's so human. And it just makes us love him because, and the other thing, this is like a weird sort of nerdy pet peeve of mine, but there's I think of there's a line in Temple of Doom where Willie Scott says something about I could be your greatest adventure, and then there's a line in Last Crusade where Sean Connery talks to Indy about sharing your adventures, and just the fact that people refer to his life and his endeavors as adventures, I think is, first of all, kind of cartoony and makes it feel a little, I don't know, to me, makes things just feel a little silly. But also, I don't think that Indiana Jones sees his life as a series of adventures. I don't think he is a thrill seeker. I don't think any of those. He doesn't go out on the field and expect to be chased by a boulder or, wind up on a rickety old rope bridge or anything. I think he would rather not. I think he would rather go out and find the artifacts that he's looking for and go back to the university and go on about his life. He's not interested in seeking those moments out, and I don't think he sees them as adventures. They are just the pitfalls that happen as a result of pursuing his passion, of pursuing the thing that he loves. And so I love the fact that when those things do happen, he reacts as any of us would be, like, this is horrible. Ow, that hurts. I don't want to. There's a great scene in Raiders where the bald German mechanic comes out, and Indy's trying to climb up on the plane, and the mechanic kind of waves his fist around and calls him out to fight, and Indiana Jones just looks at him and goes, yeah, and kind of gestures to him like, yeah, okay, 1 second, I really don't want to do this, but all right, fine. And I love that about the character. Anyways, I think I've rambled enough on that, but absolutely, I think Indiana Jones's vulnerability and humanity is the thing that makes us love him. Certainly what makes me love that character. So thank you very much.
This is Vanya Garraway recording for the Revisionist Almanac podcast. Regarding Raiders of the Lost Ark. And I'm just going to answer the questions.
Okay, Vanya. So what are your memories of watching this film for the very first time?
My memories of watching Raiders of the Lost Ark is just watching it repetitively with my family. And I think one of the things that stood out for me was, probably the fact that Harrison Ford was like really early crush for me. It's just far as like, just him as an intelligent person, a tough person, cool person, and the idea of him being sexy, that's like an early memory for me. The fact also that Spielberg is probably the first director that I ever knew. So Harrison Ford might have been one of the first actors that I remember his name. Like, I knew that was Harrison Ford. Most people say that's from Star Wars, but for me it's from Raiders of the Lost Ark. And then Spielberg, like the idea that there's a job of a director, it's probably comes from when I first started watching what I just used to refer to as Indiana Jones. But yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And then just the idea that those jobs existed is like probably really does come from Raiders of the Lost Ark for me, I think.
My next question to you, does the film hold up 40 plus years later?
Yeah, I do think that Raiders holds up still. I think it's because of the mastery of how it's pieced together. It has an iconic score. The acting is great. From Harrison Ford to all the supporting actors. But for me, it's the mastery of direction and the power of that, putting all those pieces together, but also like the blocking, just the technical ability of a director that I think sometimes people forget about. We talk about auteurs, we talk about, their style, we talk about how that translates. But there is like a lot of little technical things that a director can bring to a film that people don't notice most of the time that Spielberg has, and I think that's why he's been like in some eras completely dominant. But I think that the average person if they were to be asked who a director is, he'd probably be the first person to come up. And it's not just because of people liking his movies. I don't think that often people even recognize why they like his movies beyond being like a fantasy. It's fun. A lot of his films are adventurous, that sort of thing. But I think what he's translating, are these small things that a director can have in their technical ability that people don't even notice, but they love it. They love it for some reason. And I think that's why a lot of his films, particularly from this era, stand the test of time, because you can watch them with a lot of people, of different age groups and that sort of thing. But because I think, his technical ability is actually shining through, and he's capturing people in a way they can't even notice. So the film continues to hold up, because it has a lot of things that seem so simple. You have a hero, but he's flawed. You have a love story, you have adventure and danger, and you have a perfect enemy. Yeah, I think that's why it continues to endure.
So, do you have a favorite sequence or scene?
I'm not sure if it was always the same sequence. Like, when I was a kid, I really loved the big ball, and I loved how, like, farcical, I wouldn't have used that word, but farcical it was, him tripping, him thinking that he has, thinking he has the rope and he can climb his way up, and his little smirk, and then he, gets up there. Or the fact that he actually thought that the dirt was in around the same, volume as the idol. And, that's all very exciting. You know, throw me the, toss me the idol and throw you the whip, kind of thing. Like, all those things are just like, that's a perfect sequence, really. But I think the scene that has ended up holding up for me is this, the, what do you call it? Probably, it's not the years, it's the mileage scene, that really romantic scene. The music is perfect. That love theme between Dr. Indy and Marion it's so perfect. It's so heartwarming. It's really intimate. It's intimate in the way it looks, the lighting. It's glossy and romantic, like of another era. I mean, the whole film is kind of that, but that scene is just a perfect little, like, moment in time where all the other energy of the film shifts into this little pocket of romance and tenderness and little sexy, and but also kind of, in the end, when he falls asleep, really innocent. And I think that's the one that I continue to love, with a great deal, up to this age.
Okay, a big question. Were we, and by that I mean myself, that episode's guest, and the online voters correct in awarding this as the actual best film of 1981?
The way I see it is, sure, I think that I love that people feel that way about Raiders of the Lost Ark and Spielberg and Karen Allen. I love Karen Allen. She's, brash and spunky, and she has a lot of gumption. And we don't see a lot of those kinds of women that are leads and romantic leads in films in the same way. We went many years even without seeing that. So yeah, a lot of things won that actually won, I think, also deserved it. I think that it has its place. I don't think that sometimes I think that we rewrite things in our mind, but we have to put the entire time of what's going on at that time into context, right? So I think it's okay that it didn't win. I think it's okay that it has won your award as a revisionist, looking, perspective. Um, and I think that's good that people see things and those merits in a piece over time. But, when I look at something like Chariots of Fire, revisit that, it's a gorgeous film. It's a beautiful film. If we put score to score, like they're both iconic. Just as an example, I run a series that's that is a sports series, so I have an affection for it, and sports cinema in general, even though they're just films like anything else. And so, as much as I would love to rewrite history in that way, I think that it was okay that at the time Raiders was not seen it that way. and we've seen over time what it's been able to do. How would cinema have changed if it had won? Maybe it wouldn't have gone, the way it was able to go for years after that. Maybe it, would have changed things for the worse. So I think Chariots of Fire deserved its place then, and in this revision, Raiders maybe deserves its place here and now.
And do you have any thoughts on the actual Best Picture winner from that year, Chariots of Fire?
It's a sprawling, Chariots of Fire as Best Picture. I mean, it's a sprawling sports epic. It's rooted in classism, and it's just a beautiful picture. It's so well acted. It looks great. It sounds great. I mean, just because we see things at different times in different ways, it doesn't make one worse than the other. It also has its place.
Okay, so if you had to do it, how would you rank each film in the Indiana Jones franchise?
My Indiana Jones ranking. It's not as hard as I thought it would be, though there are some things that I think are close. The first three films to me deserve the top spot, but in a different order. So I would say Raiders of the Lost Ark is one. And that's just because of pure craft and the idea of what Steven Spielberg was capable of doing, of making that kind of picture. It's funny, it's dramatic, it's adventurous, it has all these nods to all this different kinds of cinema, these different films that have been important: Casablanca, Lawrence of Arabia, even King Kong. But so I would put that, and I love Karen Allen, and I love that relationship. So I would put that at number one. Then I would put, even though I probably had more of affection for this one when I was younger, particularly because of River Phoenix, then I put The Last Crusade second. And for a long time, I think it was number one, but each time I revisit Raiders, it moves to the top again. But, you have Sean Connery and River, and the idea, even the patterns and the things that he figures out, Indiana Jones, those things are really exciting. And just it's just as funny as Raiders, in some ways funnier too. The images, the tableaus are very cool. It's exciting. So I would put that I would say that's a very close second. Third, even though people are often angry with me because I usually dismiss Temple of Doom, because I feel like Harrison Ford is doing some sort of version of Rick and Casablanca, but also supposed to be Indy. It's awkward. I think Spielberg was distracted because he's in love with Kate Capshaw so much that she distracted him. I don't know. But Kiwi Kwan is excellent as Short Round in it. So that alone, I'll give it the third spot, even though I don't particularly care for it that much. But as a child, I truly did love it, and I understand the nostalgia for it. But it goes a little further down in three. I'd give it to Crystal Skull because we get Karen Allen back. Crystal Skull probably is the fourth one. It remains in its spot. And Karen Allen back. Shia LaBeouf, I mean, say what you want about him, the guy can act and he's good. There's some fun cool stuff with the refrigerator and that sort of thing. The aliens, I don't know. People act like there's no supernatural stuff in Indiana Jones sometimes when they talk about that, but I mean, there has always been supernatural stuff since the beginning. And then Dial of Destiny, it just kind of happened, you know what I mean? It's just like, why? But it just came upon us, and nobody really asked for it or anything, and so it's just kind of there. Maybe I need to revisit, but it's fine, whatever. It just goes in the last spot where it landed, and it anyway. So I don't know. I don't think that's controversial.
On to a question that's been driving people nuts: is Harrison Ford more famous for Indiana Jones or Han Solo?
Yeah, Han Solo is Harrison Ford's more famous role, and it's just based on the fact that Star Wars is so massive. it's numbers, right? Like it's um that's why. I think that for me, the first thing that if somebody said, "Oh, what's the first thing you really knew him for?" I would probably said Indiana Jones. That would have been when I was younger, that would have been the first thing I would have said. But I think just the sheer size of the fan base of Star Wars alone can topple almost any other franchise, as far as the fandom and how how do I say? I'll just say yeah, I'm just gonna say rabid the fan bases. Yeah, I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. Yeah, it's Han Solo, hands down.
It's time for everyone's favorite game. If they were to recast Indiana Jones with a contemporary actor, who would you pick and why?
Recasting Indiana Jones, but you also have to remember Dr. Jones. Like you can't just say I'm going to cast Superman and not think about the fact that you're also casting Clark Kent at the same time. Right? So you have to think Dr. Jones and Indiana Jones, his alter ego. So I would say it's a toss up, really. I'm going to say both actors. I think you're going to get a lot of Glenn Powell. I think Glenn Powell is going to come up a lot, but it's because it's kind of right. You have to be funny, in my opinion, to be Indiana Jones. You have to be funny, but he also can be serious and the sexy teacher. You have to think, oh, who's gonna, will the students want to, bang this professor? Yeah. If it's Glenn Powell, yes, they'll want to bang him. But also, can he throw a punch if he's, fighting a horde of Nazis? Sure, he can do that too. But also, it could be Chris Pine. You know what I mean? Here, Glenn Powell is about the same age as Harrison Ford was when he made this. And then Chris Pine's a little bit older, but he also has that he's very funny. He can be very funny. Both of these guys can. And he can be kind of, he's Kirk. He was Kirk, so it's kind of a cheat. But he can be kind of smug or, arrogant, which we see Indy's capable of being. But I also think he can be vulnerable. So it's kind of toss up between those two. And those are my reasons.
So do you think Raiders of the Lost Ark is on your Steven Spielberg Mount Rushmore, that being 4 films? And what would your Steven Spielberg Mount Rushmore be?
Yeah, I feel like as far as the Spielberg Mount Rushmore, that's a really tough one. This is probably the hardest question that I had because I thought of it in different ways. Do I cover it as far as different eras of Spielberg? Do I go 70s, like early 80s Spielberg? Do I go 90s Spielberg? The latter half of his career. So I feel like if I were to just do it as the beginning, as a kid, or a adolescent, I would say, yeah, Raiders of the Lost Ark is on there. Jaws. You could be like Jaws, E.T., and Jurassic Park. That's one way of looking at it. But then I could also do uh, Jaws, because it changed the way we look at movies in general, like his impact on cinema. Then you could do Jurassic Park, his impact on cinema again. You could do Schindler's List, showing that he's capable of doing something like that, and then you could do Fabelmans, just to give him one, his most personal film. That is another way to look at it.
Just how important is the John Williams musical score to the story and the character?
John Williams' score is incredibly important, which we've seen him be important part of Spielberg films, since the beginning, since Jaws. So, but in this, it's different. But he does tell the story of how Indy moves throughout the film. It's actually his personality is built into the score. I think it's extremely important, how he moves throughout the story, like physically and emotionally, is information in the score, in my opinion. So we have, him as a lover in it. You have him as as like someone who's stumbling at times, and like I said, farcical. That comedic side of it is in the score, and the danger that he's in is in the score, and how he handles that danger. Um, so it's really, and just like the adventure of it all when he's succeeding. When you get that uplift in Indiana Jones, when the score flips to that, it's like its main fanfare is also when Indy himself is surviving or doing well, and that's everything. It's really exciting. It's an excellent score.
All right, we're into the nitpick zone. Does it bother you that the film's plot would have played out exactly as it did with or without Indiana's involvement in the story?
I know that people think that if Indy wasn't involved in the story, that it would play out the exact same way, and I disagree. I disagree wholeheartedly. I just can't see it that way, and I don't know how much I want to explain why I don't see it that way. I just don't think it. I don't think it matters to even look at it from that perspective, because you know his involvement kind of moves things in certain directions, in certain ways, in certain, like how it plays out in time. His connection to Marion, those things don't happen without him. you know so I just, nah, that's not a thing.
And is the enduring power of Indiana Jones baked into the fact that he is often failing and in turn makes him more vulnerable?
Is it his enduring power? Failing and making him more. No, I don't think it's. I don't. I think it's maybe part of it. I would say his failing is often failing upwards. you know, and yeah, and I think that he's charming, and he's endearing. You know, and he has a moral compass. He's morally sound. Um, I think those things are almost more important to his uh his enduring power as a character, but also his desires, his how he loves, how he feels towards other people, like his friendships, and how he loves his father, or Marion, or his or Marcus. These things are I think the things that keep him going as a character. Yes, he can be silly, but I think it always is ending up moving forward, and it often shows how he cares about people, and how he cares about what he does, eh, what he believes in. That is the endurance of his character. I think those things are the things that probably matter most. His desire, his love. He's very human. I think that's truly what's at the center of it all. And I mean, like, who doesn't love somebody that hates and punches Nazis? I mean, that's enough for me.
Hi, Andrew. This is Ross and Ryan of the History on Film podcast. And just like you asked, we're here live at the Raiders off-season training camp. Ryan, what are you hoping to see this week?
Well, I'm not the biggest Raiders fan, but, I'm interested to see how this whole revamped defense looks under new head coach Pete Carroll. I think he can rebuild the Legion of Boom. Then this team should be able to compete with some of the high-powered offenses in the division. How about you, Ross? What are you looking for?
Well, of course, the player everyone here is talking about is first-round draft pick Austin Gentry. He has looked absolutely explosive in his drills, and I think that this new Chip Kelly rushing attack is really going to help the team be more aggressive on both sides of the ball, especially when you look at what they were able to do in free agent.
Oh boy. Ryan, Ross, you clearly didn't understand the assignment. I wanted you to talk about Raiders of the Lost Ark, the greatest adventure movie of all time. Come on.
Oh, okay. That actually makes a lot more sense.
Dude, I told you to double check that email.
Well, we are still Ross and Ryan of the History on Film podcast. We are huge fans of the Revisionist Almanac, and we are super psyched to talk to you about one of our all-time favorite films. This is a movie we both genuinely love.
Yes, and it's one. A lot of the times we talk about movies that we have like we both watch, but like then always watch them together. But this is one of the ones I know of at least two times we have probably watched it together.
We've seen it together several times. We've seen it
Yeah.
apart several times. It's one that we love. I have an anthropology degree because of this movie. I wish I could say it's something more high-minded than that, but no, it was like 85% Raiders.
When you were getting your anthropology degree, did you think upon graduation they were just going to give you the fedora and the whip, or?
Well, so UCF has like a really good anthropology program, like an anthropology graduate program. So I assumed I would get it then.
Oh, okay. All right. Kind of like how like when I bought a Subaru, I thought I'd get they they came with a golden doodle and a kayak, but you have to buy those separate. So
I kind of thought like, when you get a master's degree, they give you like the extra cords and stoles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was something like that the department would get in touch with me on.
But you got a birthday coming up, so I know what to get you this year.
Ooh. So we took a look at some of the questions that Andrew sent us. So the first one was, does the film hold up 40 plus years later? I think we both agreed that yes, it absolutely does hold up.
Oh, absolutely. What I really appreciate about this movie is, it was coming, it was released in 81, so it's being made in the shadow of the new blockbuster era, starting with Jaws in 75. Of course, we had Star Wars, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, and then this is where, Spielberg and Lucas get the Voltron up, and
this kicks it into high gear, I feel like.
Right.
Yeah.
And, all those movies are still great. Jaws and Close Encounters of the Third Kind still, it feels a little dated now, a little bit, when you go back and watch them. Raiders, and I don't know if that's because of it was set in the early 40s, World War II era, if it was, because Spielberg and Lucas are just that good. Although there's some debate there because they've made some real clunkers that I can't stand.
I think working together, they kind of they kind of counter some of their worst impulses.
Yes.
But I'm picking up what you're saying. I think that just like, because The Godfather, the book, was not set in the 40s. It was like a present day kind of a book, I believe. But then by setting it in the 40s, they make it a little bit more timeless because they're making it inherently a period piece to some degree. And I think a big reason why this holds up is because it is intentionally out of time. It is a pastiche. It's an homage to these radio serials.
Right.
And, these kind of action, like The Shadow and all that kind of stuff, of a different era. Like it's their recontextualization, their reappropriation of that stuff that they loved. And I think that doing that does sort of insure you against a lot of, like the perils of what we think of as like a film aging.
Right. But it still feels modern. It feels like it kind of came out this year in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Where it's not too many 80s movies. It would be right at home with any other movie that came like alongside the MCU or the newer Star Wars films or anything else that's coming out, these days. It doesn't feel like an 80s film the way some of its contemporaries of 81 feel like an 80s movie, right?
Yeah.
It still feels very modern. It definitely, I know we talked about this a little bit when we were kind of prepping for this. Martin Scorsese talks about how the MCU movies are theme park rides in a lot of ways. I would argue, I think Raiders of the Lost Ark feels a lot like a theme park ride, to the point where the Disneyland ride
is an Indiana Jones movie, basically.
It's an Indiana Jones movie, but I mean, they changed the set. Of course, they have to, change the setting, and it's like, it's the Temple of the Crystal Eye or whatever the hell it is, and whatever. And they're getting one now in Orlando, Animal Kingdom, allegedly.
Ooh.
Yeah, Tropical Americas. But it at the same time, you can you watch videos of like the Disneyland ride, and it feels like watching an Indiana Jones movie, and I'm told it feels like being on an Indiana Jones in an Indiana Jones movie, the same way, you can kind of consider it a theme park ride, and that it translates well for a theme park attraction, I think.
Yeah, and it's like it can certainly be interpreted as derogatory to say like, well, this movie is kind of like a theme park, but I think this is that in the best sense. Like I've said this for a long time, that Raiders is kind of like a theme park ride because it just hits all the right spots at the same time. It gives you all of the, kind of right feelings, and it's just, you don't want to take your eyes off of it. Like it has all the right ups and downs.
Right.
Um,
And also I think what helps this movie and where it's the sequel to it, which is really prequel, but the next movie, the next installment in the Indiana
yeah.
Jones movie, um, you know, one, I have to say, we've seen the example of what happens when Indiana Jones isn't fighting Nazis,
Mhm.
and he's much better fighting Nazis, number one. But also, I think because it has the whole like ancient Egypt thing going on, ancient Egypt was always a seller. Ancient Egypt, going back to the earliest of silent films, has always been, I mean, even pre-silent films. I mean, the magic flute. It's kind of like, you want to make some money, set it in Egypt. Make it whimsical and fantastical and set it in Egypt. Same way the first Mummy movies, the first, the Brendan Fraser ones, big hits. Why? Put a mummy, put a desert, put a pyramid back there, and you're gonna put butts in seats.
Well, and it's just also like that genre of like romantic adventure, like Romancing the Stone, which would come
Hmm.
out a couple years after this, Raiders, The Mummy, like you mentioned. There was that Sandra Bullock one that just came out recently, The Lost City, I think it was called. I was
Sure. Yeah.
crying with laughter watching that movie. Like, and any kind of like, I mean, Grail Quest, obviously
Right.
that's Last Crusade, but it's like, any of these kind of like Da Vinci Code, National Treasure, like any of these kind of like antiquity heist, kind of
Right.
adventure movies, like that's a great genre. Like that and the celebrity car race genre of like
Right.
Cannonball Run, Mad 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 World, like those are winning genres. And I
Right.
know Office Gym has one coming out soon about the Fountain of Youth or something, but
Oh.
like that genre, that's a winning genre for me, no matter what.
I mean, look at it this way. Even the first couple of Pirates of the Caribbean movies, they
Yeah,
were,
yeah,
they,
yeah,
they
yeah.
were not pirate, because pirate movies historically have done pretty awful, right?
Hmm.
In the last 40 years. But the Pirates of the Caribbean movies, because they were more romance,
Yeah,
the romance adventure things, just with a pirate patina pasted onto
hmm
it, and it worked.
yeah.
It worked. I mean, I liked the first three movies of those, and then they kept making them. But again, and then based on a theme park ride. Again, I
Yeah.
think theme park rides aren't necessarily a bad thing.
No, it's not meant to be derisive in any way.
No.
But we are talking, we are being featured on the Revisionist Almanac. So I feel like we got to address the golden statue in the room, the other
Oh,
golden statue in the room, I should say.
oh yeah.
We're not swapping out a bag of sand
Bag
for
of
the
sand.
Oscar, but uh, the Revisionist Almanac gave this film Best Picture 1981, as well as Best Direction Steven Spielberg and Supporting Actress Karen Allen. So for those of you who aren't aware of our show, we had a very high-profile episode on the film Reds.
Hmm.
So we are not going to be, at least I am not going to be as generous in giving out these awards to Raiders of the Lost Ark, despite being one of my all-time favorite films. I'm gonna say I think Reds. If we're giving out hardware, I gotta say Reds gets Best Picture and Warren Beatty for Best Direction. Supporting actress, I'll give it to Karen Allen. I'll side with the people on that one. I don't want to piss too many people off in our first guest appearance here.
Yeah, no, I understand. It's funny because sometimes the Academy gets it really right.
Hmm.
Like a few years later, they got it right with Amadeus. Best picture, best director. Amadeus, probably number one all-time favorite film, right?
Hmm.
But then sometimes the Academy gets it really, really wrong.
Well, like Chariot of Fire, I mean, I was born a couple years after this it came out, but it's like I only know that film as a meme, of,
Right.
the kind of running in slow motion with the, iconic music behind it. It's like I have since seen it, but I mean, it certainly didn't stick with me nearly as much as Raiders or Reds,
Right.
or honestly, Ragtime. I like a lot more than Chariots of Fire too.
Right.
I still personally give it to Reds. I think that is, especially for our show, where we
Mhm.
use films as a teaching tool. I think, it's going to be hard to top Reds, but
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, you also look at what else was being nominated, what else was out there for that year. You have Raiders, you have Reds. I've never heard of Atlantic City until just now,
yeah, neither of us had.
which
It looks
is,
interesting.
I mean, it's Burt Lancaster and some other great actors and stuff in there. So, but you also have, like you said, Ragtime on Golden Pond, which, of course, Jane Fonda, and that is amazing. Arthur, Dudley Moore.
Ooh, yeah, I forgot Arthur was this year.
I mean, you have some pretty heavy hitters. So, I mean, it's hard for me to say. I personally don't think Chariots of Fire deserves that at all. I do think for me, it would be kind of a three-way toss-up between Raiders on Golden Pond and Reds.
Mhm.
Just because Reds from an educational standpoint, Raiders of the Lost Ark I really enjoy the film. Like if I have to sit through a movie, I'm going to pick that out of the three, to be honest.
Mhm.
And then on Golden Pond, it's just, you get to see some of these like Silver Age actors just,
Yeah.
chew all the scenery, which is,
We talk about the Academy judges kind of being out of touch now. Think about
yeah,
how much more out of touch they were back then, when you couldn't harass people over the internet. So,
right, right. But yeah, I mean, on Golden Pond, I mean, you have Jane Fonda, Henry Fonda, and Katharine Hepburn in there. I mean, that's
Mhm.
just, and Jane Fonda is probably still one of my all-time favorite. I don't care how old she is. I will always have the biggest crush on her ever. I always love her, and Faye Dunaway too a little
Mhm.
bit. But that's neither here nor there.
Dark Horse candidate, the Great Muppet Caper.
I mean, yeah, yeah. I look at it this way. On Golden Pond, Raiders of the Lost Ark and Reds are much longer lived. I
Hmm.
mean, people are still talking. We did an episode on Reds. We did an episode on the historiography of it.
Hmm. We spoke with the author. For those who are interested, please do check that episode out. We spoke with historian Robert Rosenstone, who wrote the book the film was based on and
Yes,
was the historical consultant on the film. So he did
yes,
work in the production end of it as well with Warren Beatty.
yes.
And the stories that he has, that he shares with us on the episode and after the episode, were quite interesting.
Yes.
He's a great guest. We
I,
love him.
I have to say, I am glad that Warren Beatty lives up to all of the stereotypes and
Yeah.
legend, which is good to know. But again, I mean, Chariots of Fire, I mean, honestly, in 2025, who remembers that movie other
Yeah.
than I think the music's remembered more than
Yeah.
it's one of those
It's
the soundtrack's more enduring.
yeah. It's a
Um,
meme. I mean, I think
it
in the
absolutely is.
academic sense, it is a meme at this point. It's
Absolutely.
not to take away, it's a great film. I'm
Yeah.
sure the people loved it at the time, but it's like it has not sustained,
No.
for the
Um,
young people like us
right.
in
I
our
mean,
Heelys and our, Pac-Man video games. So
and I would even say that even Reds is borderline there almost for like young people, whereas Raiders of the Lost Ark is still relevant, kind
yeah.
of. I mean, they're still making Indiana Jones movies.
Yeah.
And then on Golden Pond, it's been remade so many times, and it's been pointed to as like, oh, well, this isn't as good as the one with Henry Fonda and Katharine Hepburn.
Hmm.
I think it's probably like 20 years ago now, but I think CBS or ABC, one of them did a miniseries version of it,
That sounds right.
and everyone's like, yeah, but why would you make a movie with like Henry Fonda, Jane Fonda, and Katharine Hepburn?
And then the last question, and this feels wrong. This was upsetting to read. Does it bother you that the film's plot would have played out exactly as it did with or without Indiana's involvement in the story? That's not upholding movie mindset. Movies are about fun, having a good time. Doesn't matter, it's that he's our surrogate into this, action adventure.
But here's the thing. It couldn't have played out without his involvement because he's the one that figured out that the staff was too long
Yeah,
and that
it
they were
was
they were digging in the wrong spot.
it was one Kadam too high.
And they were
And
digging in the wrong spot.
and we're the clothes hanger guy, I forget his name, the evil Weasley Nazi guy. Was
Face melting Nazi guy,
Yeah.
yeah.
Was he following Indy when they got on the plane to go to Tibet? Or
Ah,
was he must have been, right?
right,
Because otherwise why would they leave out of the same place? Because Indy knew where to find Marion, but
right.
they didn't. So like they were clearly following behind him. So who knows when they would have found the sunstone.
Right. And again, let's say it this way: if Indy hadn't figured it out, the Germans would still be digging in the same wrong
Right.
spot.
And
You know.
even if they get to, the island, they open it up and they all die, it's like he's still there to say like, hey, let's take this back to the warehouse. That's also how the first episode of the X-Files ends. So I'm
Right.
thinking it's supposed to be the same place, which would be the Pentagon. So,
Or
but was the Pentagon even built then? I don't know.
no, I don't think that.
We've been out in the sun too long.
I would like to think it's actually not the Pentagon's in the Smithsonian, which seems a
Okay,
little bit more
that
fitting,
makes sense.
Yeah,
That feels more right.
that's my headcanon for that.
We stuck it in the nation's attic.
Yeah, pretty much. I vehemently disagree that no, the plot would have done.
Yeah, at first I thought this question was Andrew being a little stinker, but now I agree with you. I do think it plays out differently.
I mean, the only way I would make the argument that it doesn't play out different, like okay, the Nazis figure out they're in the wrong spot. It's one Kadam too high. They figure it out. They get it. Blah 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 blah. Yeah, then yeah, their faces are still melting at the end when they open up the Ark of the Covenant. Just Indy's not there to be like, close your eyes, Miriam.
Mhm.
That's the only difference. Sure, but again, they would have never been able to get it if Indy hadn't figured it out in the first place.
Yeah. So our answer to this question, myth busted. We're going to end this the way that we end the episodes of our show. We always like to give a book recommendation and a film recommendation. The film recommendation I had, we're talking about these like sort of tributes to old serials and old action of the 20s, 30s, and 40s. And thinking about it, I love The Rocketeer from 1993. And that is in many ways very similar to this. It did not have the same reception that Raiders got, but I would just want to encourage people who maybe haven't seen The Rocketeer. That is just such a fun movie. A lot of times you watch a movie that you loved as a kid and you're like, I guess there was nothing better, on at the time. But it's like, I rewatched this like early on during COVID. It's like, oh yeah, this movie, like it still hits, it still slaps, and then I watched it again like a year or two later. It's like, oh yeah, here we go again. Like, I love it. So, The Mummy had a good run, with all the sequels and stuff. The Rocketeer really did not get its due for whatever reason.
I have a film recommendation, and you're going to hate me for this one, but I'm going to do it anyway.
Okay.
1955, Howard Hawks, Land of the Pharaohs.
Oh, I'll allow it.
Okay.
And then, like I said, this movie got me to get an anthropology degree. I'm a cultural historian. I was thinking like, oh, I should recommend like some Clifford Geertz, really dig into it. And then doing the research for this episode, I found a brand new book that I just cracked open. It's called Readers of the Lost Ark. And it's by Dr. Kevin McGough or Kevin Magua. And he talks about the Ark of the Covenant as a meta symbol. And so how cultures talk about the Ark of the Covenant over time, like using that as a way of interpreting like what is important about these religious groups, like the role of religion, the role of, sort of like spirituality and the supernatural. So like really using the Ark of the Covenant as like a floating symbol, to interpret other things about, these societies, these religious cultures, sort of like what it tells us more broadly about them. And the book is brand new, so, I haven't finished it yet, but it's like it's too good already not to make my official recommendation. But
Right.
if you're interested in this, let me know. There's plenty more
Yeah.
where that came from.
Yeah, I mean, we could do a whole episode just on like the Covenant of the Ark, and
Yeah, I mean, this guy would be a great guest. So
is it in Ethiopia or not?
Mhm.
Was it scientifically speaking? They think if you go on the biblical description now, they think it was actually radioactive, and that's why people would melt and burn if they got too close to it or something. That had worked. Because
Mhm.
the Israelites that had to wear it that were allowed to carry it had to wear like leaded. Remember they had to wear leaded clothes and everything. So yeah,
They
the
had to
fact
wear like the little Paw Patrol ones that that they have when you go to get an X-ray done.
I don't know about that, but I think that's just your dentist because mine doesn't have one of those.
Oh, okay. Well, I was good. I got to go in the toy drawer last time. So. All right. But, thank you, everybody. We're Ross and Ryan again of the History on Film podcast. Please do check us out. And then, Andrew, before we hand it back over to you, we just want to let everybody know all about our brand new DraftKings promo code. Go ahead. No, don't hang up.
Hi, this is Darin Lundberg. I am the co-host of the NostalgiaCast and Back to Bluey podcasts. You can find me on Twitter at DW or on Blue Sky at dwlundberg.bsky.social. Andrew, just wanted to thank you for allowing me and a bunch of other people to participate in this special collaborative discussion of Raiders of the Lost Ark, a movie that is very near and dear to me. I want to try to make this quick because obviously your episode is going to be running long. I don't want to add another 40 minutes to that. So I'm going to just go ahead and answer these questions as you have them in the questionnaire you sent to us. And maybe we can form an idea of why I think this movie is so special. First question, what are your memories of watching this film? I don't think I have memories before Indiana Jones. I've said many times before on NostalgiaCast that Jaws was the movie that got me to fall in love with movies. I didn't understand why it was making me scared, why it was making me feel like enthralled, why I was identifying with the Brody character so much. And so that made me look into movie directing, made me learn the name Steven Spielberg. That's the first director that I memorized, committed to memory, just because he was able to do that for me and introduce me to that magic of movies like nothing I'd seen before. And so obviously growing up as an only child raised by a single mother, my mom wanted to give me all the things that growing boys should be interested in. And so showing me movies was one of those things. After showing me Jaws and getting addicted to that, obviously Raiders of the Lost Ark was the next thing. Like that's, Spielberg at the time, his next big hit. And so yeah, I think Indiana Jones has just been my hero ever since he first steps from the shadows in Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first viewing, maybe back when I was 5 or 6. And I think there's something about Raiders of the Lost Ark that when it ended, I couldn't express it. I mean, this movie is just so great, and I need to figure out why. So again, there's more of that. Does the film hold up 40 years later? So a bit of a roundabout answer to this. I think when you make movies that last, I think, first of all, you're making movies that are good. You're not trying to win awards. You're not trying to win favor. You're just trying to make a good movie. I think that's important. I don't think there's any kind of I'm better than you feelings from Spielberg. He's just so hungry to make a movie or a good movie and to get his talent and his joy out there and that comes through with his movies. So Raiders of the Lost Ark is a bit of nostalgia betting. If you're looking at the 70s movies and the movie brats, Lucas and Coppola and Scorsese, De Palma, Spielberg, these guys were taking movies that they'd grown up on, movies they'd fallen in love with that made them the movie brats, right? And they repackaged them, repurposed them. Looking at Jaws is basically a creature feature. It's Creature from the Black Lagoon. It's not the most original thing, but it's given a fresh spin. It's giving a modern, updated spin, and you can hear Spielberg in every frame of that movie and just how hungry he is. On a beach in Hawaii, he and Lucas paddling around. And I think Spielberg said, I want to make a James Bond movie. And Lucas said, I've got something better for you. So this is going to lead to something that I think is really cool about what these set movies brats did. If you're looking at Indiana Jones, it's obviously influenced by Michael Curtiz, by Robin Hood. It's influenced by Carol Lombard, the Marion character. It's influenced by James Bond, obviously, like we talked about. Alan Quartermain, a fedora-wearing, adventure-seeking hero. And most importantly, what Raiders is, it's an updating of the Republic cliffhanger series of the 30s and 50s. Now, here's the thing with that is that, yeah, it's taking all these different IPs and these different movies, but it's spreading them out and giving like a new kind of fresh spin on it. So that's what Raiders is. It's a cliffhanger updating. If you were to look at Raiders of the Lost Ark, Temple of Doom, Last Crusade, each of these movies opens with a 10 to 12 minute sequence that introduces our hero visually, but each cliffhanger serial of the Saturday matinees, they ran a good 10 to 15 minutes. So looking at these three movies, and if you were to split them apart, those first three are segmented in 10 to 12 minute segments. You can average them out where it's different cliffhangers basically combined into one huge movie. And today, it's the nostalgia baiting, right? Like I said, but today it's just, oh, let's repurpose this shot from Jurassic Park of the Raptors. There's actual love and care that went into that original shot. And now we're just redoing it just so people can point at it. And that's it. That's the only feeling that it gives. It doesn't build on that. What Raiders does is it takes these serials, takes James Bond, and it gives it a new, fresh spin. It makes it its own. Spielberg is not just comfortable doing a spin on those. He wants to make it his thing. And so it's a modernizing of all those things. It's kidding kind of those tropes. And when you do that, you make a movie that lasts. When you try to buck trends, when you try to break the mold, those are the movies, those are the songs, those are the books, those are the television series. That's the art that lasts because they were breaking rules. They were making up new rules as they went along. And I think that's what Raiders does. That's why it holds up 40 years later. Do I have a favorite sequence or scene? I'm going to answer this in, again, 2 tiers. First, there's the easy answer. I think this movie has the greatest chase scene of all time. And I think it's because not just that they're doing the Yakima Canutt scene from Stagecoach. That scene in Stagecoach has him going under the horse carriage and then he's basically trampled or run over and he's left behind. That's an incredible stunt for back in 1939. Now you're updating it for 1981. But instead of being left behind, Indy uses his whip, grabs onto the bottom of the truck, gets dragged behind, climbs up the whip, climbs back onto the truck into that cab to get that Nazi driver what's coming to him. It's an updating. It's not just rehashing things. It's taking it to another level. It's building on it. It's giving us something new. And I think that rising and falling action of that chase, all very iconic. That's my easy answer. Now, the obvious answer, though, has to be that swordsman scene. I know we know the backstory of it, how Harrison Ford was sick and didn't want to do the whole choreography, so he said, let's just shoot him. But the thing is, when you watch that scene for the first time, it is building to that moment where you think he's going to have to fight this swordsman guy. But then Harrison Ford gives that classic look of, I don't have time for this. I got to find Marion, right? Pulls out his gun, shoots the guy in the head, turns around, back to business. That defines Indiana Jones better than that opening idol sequence, I think, because he's willing to do the dirty thing to get the job done, right? That is just, it's an encapsulation of what Indy is just in that one moment. And I think it delights people when they see that for the first time. Were you and Joey correct in awarding this as the actual best film of 1981 during the episode? I think it speaks volumes for populace feelings versus Academy feelings, right? And you probably already know my feelings on the Oscars. Andrew, you certainly do. Listeners listening to this might. I just think Oscars are kind of a weathering rod for what's popular at the time, what's in the zeitgeist at the time, what's most rewardable at the time. So it's not so much about what will last. And, that's hard to gauge. Like, you don't know if a movie's going to be talked about in 5 to 10 years. You don't know if it's going to disappear within 6 months. You're just voting what your heart or your brain says, what's popular, what's sticking in your mind right then. I think awarding Raiders of the Lost Ark is smart because people are still talking about Raiders of the Lost Ark today. Indiana Jones is still a talking point, even though his last 2 movies were disasters, so to speak, didn't really work as well as the original 3 did. I think there's a reason we still talk about Raiders today. It's because of that love of the cinema. It's because Spielberg has such energy and such innovation and such invention with everything he does, gives everything such a good energy that, yes, I mean, Andrew, like you said, it speaks to your head and your heart. Joey chose Reds, which is a great movie, don't get me wrong. I think the difference is people know Raiders of the Lost Ark. There's a reason I've seen this movie countless times and I've only seen Reds or Chariots of Fire once or twice. That's not by mistake. I mean, that's definitely something that's going to, you want to return to these movies that are going to give you this feeling. I just think Raiders does that for me. Do I have any thoughts on the actual Best Picture winner from that year, Chariots of Fire? Honestly, no. Like, I don't remember the movie at all, besides the Vangelis score. And that Vangelis score, the Chariots of Fire theme, I do picture guys running on the sand, but I also picture like kind of a meta modernization of that, like people tripping and falling in the sand. It kind of becomes like a joke. I know that the movie's about Olympic runners. For some reason, I thought it was directed by Richard Attenborough. It's not. I think I was thinking of Gandhi, which comes out the next year. Looking at the director, Hugh Hudson, like this is his first big movie. He did Greystoke Legend of Tarzan after this, which is a disaster of sorts. And that's maybe why he went nowhere. Again, I don't think Chariots of Fire really makes an impression past 1981. I think people go when they revisit Raiders of the Lost Ark because it gives them a feeling. They don't go back and revisit Chariots of Fire to feel anything. I don't know. I just don't hear a lot of conversation about that. Next question. How do I rank each film in the Indiana Jones franchise? Absolutely descending order. I mean, on a good day, you could probably get me to say that Temple of Doom is at least equal to Raiders of the Lost Ark, because I think it is the best and most fiercely directed, the most breathlessly directed of all the Indiana Jones movies. I like to say that Spielberg directs Temple of Doom like he's being chased, like he's got something to prove. And there's just so much energy to it that it's exhausting, but in a super fun, grab your partner by the arm kind of way. But Raiders of the Lost Ark is the one that set the standard, man. Like I said, it's not just James Bond. It's taking James Bond and it's giving him new dimensions. I know people love Last Crusade, and I love it too. They just did a re-release of the movies in theaters, and I went to go see Last Crusade in a theater, and there's a world of difference between the way that Last Crusade plays versus how Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and Dial of Destiny play. With Last Crusade, I think Connery's there to kind of make you forget the fact that Last Crusade is Rise of Skywalker of its day. It's an apology for the movie that came before it that kind of divided fans and the fan base. It is a return to the things that we're comfortable with. This is basically a beat for beat narrative rehashing of Raiders of the Lost Ark. You know, they go after a precious artifact, and then Spielberg gets to add his whole father trope in there, which obviously he's going to do. So yeah, Last Crusade has that hook with Connery and Ford, but if it wasn't for Raiders, we wouldn't have Last Crusade. Last Crusade, like I said, is a copy of Raiders. As much as I love it, Raiders set the tone. Last Crusade just copied it. But if you're looking at the difference between the last two Indiana Jones movies as well, somebody pointed out that everything's done visually in those first three movies. The first 10 minutes, you get this adventure that introduces you to who Indiana Jones is, what he's after, kind of the motifs that he's going to be following for the rest of the movie. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, it's not as succinct. Like, it takes 20, 25 minutes to accomplish the same thing that Raiders and Temple of Doom and Last Crusade do, which is a grand adventure, all told visually, all told with music, all told with these grand kind of stunts within a 10-minute period. Kingdom of the Crystal Skull just showed us that Spielberg was just spinning his wheels, I think, and that's why he didn't step back in for Dial of Destiny. I just think he just didn't have what he used to have with that, and so he just moved on, and that's why Dial of Destiny, I don't think it has a personality at all. It doesn't have any of the Spielberg kind of influence, as little as Kingdom of the Crystal Skull has. Dial of Destiny has even less. It was just such a hard watch in a movie theater. Like I said, there's a world of difference between Dial of Destiny and Last Crusade. Do I think Harrison Ford is more famous for Indiana Jones or Han Solo? I like him better as Indiana Jones. I think he's ingrained in my mind as Indy, but I think more people are introduced to Harrison Ford through Star Wars than through Indiana Jones. Han Solo is just the life of those, the first three Star Wars. That's the character that everybody gravitates to. That's where their love for Harrison Ford is born from. Indiana Jones is kind of his secondary role compared to that, even though I think his role to last is Indiana Jones. If they were to cast or recast Indiana Jones with a contemporary actor, who would you pick and why? I don't know. Brendan Fraser is Rick O'Connell fighting mummies. I wouldn't, right? I mean, watching Last Crusade in the theater and realizing Indiana Jones had his day. Indiana Jones made his mark. You make Kingdom of the Crystal Skull and then you release it 19 years after the fact. You release Dial of Destiny, 14, 15 years after that. It's gone. Like, people that are watching movies today, that are going to movies, don't have any connection with Indiana Jones as an IP. And that's why a movie fails. That's why Terminator fails. You have movies that don't have the same grasp they did in the 80s or 20, 30 years ago or 40 years ago. It's not the same. What they did, like I said, with Indiana Jones, with Raiders of the Lost Ark, they made a new thing out of old things. They took spare parts and they made a brand new feeling that we hadn't felt before. Now's the time to do something new. Now's not the time to just do something that worked back in 1981. Now's the time to make a new Indiana Jones, make a new character that can kind of step in for Indiana Jones. And I think that's where the problem is. Indiana Jones is just no longer relevant. He had his day. We have these movies. That's enough. Is Raiders of the Lost Ark on your Steven Spielberg Mount Rushmore? It absolutely is. Like, I just basically did a ranking with recently with Brian Scuttle of Sonic Cinema of top 10 Spielberg films, and Raiders of the Lost Ark is my number 4. Like I said, Spielberg has something ingrained in him where he just is able to capture the feeling of what audiences want, at least pre, 2000s he did anyway, pre Jurassic Park, pre Schindler's List. Yeah, Steven Spielberg is the most personal director to me. The way he does his characters, the way that his stories are constructed, the way he has these little teeny grace notes, they appeal to me like no other director. So personal wise, my Mount Rushmore, I would have actually AI, artificial intelligence, is my number one, controversially, maybe. That's just his most mature. It's his most complicated. It's his most heartbreaking in my mind. There's a connection that I had with my mom that he was able again to translate to the screen, and it just broke me by the end of that. E.T. is basically the same. It's my second favorite Spielberg. E.T. Elliot was me. Again, I did not understand watching it as a 5-year-old why this Elliot kid felt like I was being projected up on a screen. I didn't have very many friends growing up. All I really had was toys to play with. I would have given anything to have a friend like E.T. and just to be able to save him and send him back home. There's just something so primal about that. E.T. speaks to me on a personal, deep level. Number 3 on my Mount Rushmore would be Jaws. Like, it's hard not to, like I said, all I need to say about this one for this part of the discussion, but Jaws is very indelible and is impactful for me. And then Raiders of the Lost Ark, again, I think the greatest action adventure movie of all time. It's firmly at number 4. How important is the John Williams musical score to the story and the character? Oh boy, I think the Raiders March is my vote for the greatest superhero theme of all time. We know famously that John Williams joined the Air Force as a young man, played the piano, played in band for the Air Force, played many, many marches. Obviously, his influences growing up, movie-wise, Max Steiner, Eric Korngold, the Cliffhanger serials. The score to this, the adventure score, captures that feeling of Korngold, of Robin Hood, of the Seahawk, that kind of thing. It captures that feeling in the music. This score tells a story. It tells us who Indiana Jones is. It tells us what the Ark means and the power that the Ark has because of the way that it's played, softly at first. Then it builds in tension when Indy and Saul finally have the Ark and they're pulling it out of its box in the Well of Souls. There is just a danger. But if you're looking at that Raiders March, the Raiders March itself tells a story. It explains who Indiana Jones is in a theme. It's basically, that theme is a series of victories and retreats. If you look at the theme of it, dun, 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 that's a victory. It raises in the notes, raise higher. Dun, 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 that's a lowering. That's retreat. That's a backing off. I don't know how John Williams' brain thinks, but even those first few notes of the Raiders March tells a story. Indiana Jones is all about victories and retreats. It's all about picking himself up after he fails and making it happen. It's that tension. It's that lack of resolution. It's a build. It's a triumph. So that at the end, we feel that Indiana Jones is a hero. I think that's very important for the story, very important for the character. Does it bother me that the film's plot would have played out exactly as it did with or without Indiana's involvement in the story? This kind of thought about Raiders of the Lost Ark, I didn't really hear it until maybe the last 10, 15 years. And I remember it being kind of a cluster happening all at once. I heard it once from somebody, and then within a week or a month's time, I heard it from somebody else. And then after that, within a week or a month's time, I heard it from somebody else. It snowballed until 15 people had said the same thing, and each person said it as if they were the first person to discover this or say this. I'm not interested in gotchas. I think that's what a gotcha is. It's kind of, again, maybe this will ruffle some feathers. A gotcha is not film criticism. A gotcha is the person acting like they're better than the movie they're watching. It's acting like they're smarter than the movie. It's acting like they're above the movie. It's not really criticizing or diving into the themes of the movie itself. This movie is not so much about Indy's outer journey as much as it is about his inner journey. We hear the Ark theme when Marcus is explaining to him that this is like nothing you've ever gone after before. And then Indy hand waves it and the music cuts off. That's telling you what the arc of the Ark is, or Indy's connection to the Ark. And as he's in the map room, as he goes to the Well of Souls, as he loses Marion, gets her back, they go after the Ark with the truck chase like we talked about. They get on the ship. He's told by Belloc that he's an archaeologist. He's a discoverer, right? He won't blow up the Ark. And so there's a respect that Indy's gaining. He is understanding the importance of the Ark to the point where he's tied up with Marion, and he believes, as opposed to where he was talking with Marcus, that there is a power to this. Close your eyes, Marion. Whatever you do, do not look. And that's how, in air quotes, he beats the Nazis, right? Because he's not using it as just a prize to be won. So yeah, I'm not about the gotchas. once something is mentioned 10, 15 times, it's time to not mention that anymore. It's time to move on to something else, I feel. Final question. Is the enduring power of Indiana Jones baked into the fact that he is often failing and in turn making him more vulnerable? I think the fact that he's fallible, I think the fact that Indy makes mistakes makes him human. When you see him grab for that vine and it pulls out and he gets that look of desperation on his face, he literally pulls himself back up, literally figures out a solution to it, powers through. James Bond, especially in the earlier days, never made a mistake, never did anything wrong. He was always the guy that you aspired to be, even though killing people for a living isn't something you should aspire to do. Indiana Jones, like I mentioned before, is taking that character and making it something else, giving it a different spin, giving him a personality that's apart from James Bond. Indiana Jones is a better hero than James Bond. He's a better hero than any superhero I can name because of the fact that he's not just fallible, he pulls himself back up. It's this determination, whether he fights dirty, whatever he has to pull from. Indiana Jones will always find a solution. He'll always get back on his feet. I think ever since my first watch of Raiders of the Lost Ark, that idea was just ingrained in my head. That's what a hero should be. And that's why I would say he is the greatest hero of our time. That's why I would say he is the star of the greatest action adventure movie of my lifetime. It's why I would say Steven Spielberg is the greatest director in my mind, because he's able to take past IP, past movies, all of that, and roll it into a completely new experience for us. Again, Andrew, I thank you for allowing me to participate in this. Raiders of the Lost Ark, good movie.
We're all getting fed up of endlessly scrolling for our next movie fix. So to get passionate about films again, join 3 movie mates on the Never Ending Watchlist movie podcast, where we take you on a movie journey as we seek to build the ultimate movie watchlist.
Seen all of those films are absolute bangers.
Yeah,
absolute bangers.
Bangers.
I applaud you again, sir.
We deep dive specific movies to find out facts, theories, and funny takes, and ultimately decide whether a movie is worthy of being on the watchlist.
I can't recommend this film.
Oh! We'll debate top 5s, rank directors' movies, and interview film fans just like you.
And she is an incredibly complex villain. She's fierce, she's immovable.
So whether you're a casual movie fan or hardened cinephile, we've got plenty for you to enjoy.
I got outvoted by the guy who chose the movie for this episode.
Join me, Damon Carter, Alex Hall, and Cam Young on the Never Ending Watchlist movie podcast every week on Podcast Everywhere.
It's easier to find Cameron on Facebook than it is to find a plot in existence. Right, anyway, for now, it's farewell to Alex.
So, does the film hold up after 40 plus years? I know my answer is a resounding yes, and that seems to be a nearly unanimous opinion based on this first round of collaborators. There have been some great answers, but when it comes to my favorite sequence, I could point to a number of them. However, there's something about the opening treasure hunt into the boulder chasing Indy that awakens the inner child in me who first saw this film 30 years ago on that old small TV and VHS. And I'm also incredibly proud of the fact that when I covered the 1981 film year in season 1 all the way back in 2024, I was firmly behind Karen Allen, Steven Spielberg, and the film all deserving revised Oscars in their respective category, and the online community that votes was firmly in my corner. The Oscars has a habit of taking themselves way too seriously, and this is just a case of a great film that they wisely put up as a Best Picture nominee, but they didn't have the guts to go all the way with. And speaking of that Oscars year and the actual Best Picture winner, Chariots of Fire, it's not necessarily that I would call it a bad film, but it's incredibly slow, boring, dull. I could go on with synonyms, but you get my point. The movie is only remembered for its iconic score and for being a truly bad Best Picture winner. But there's no denying what is the most important, most remembered, and best film of 1981, a movie that belongs in a museum. So thanks for sticking around until the end of this part. In a month's time, I'll be back with the second part, featuring more incredible podcasters and movie content creators, as well as answering even more indie questions myself. But while you're here, I hope you'll take time to subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you're using, as well as leaving a review. And you can of course find and follow me on every social media platform using the handle RevAlmanac. I am Andrew, and I cannot wait to see you next time.